Hello and welcome to Chinese Novel Audio Wave. Explore our playlist for more captivating novels, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new audiobook. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 81. Alan felt a little unspeakable gratitude. This Marquis Crazy Lion seemed to be really taking care of him, and he seemed to be very optimistic about him. To this, Alan just nodded. He decided to respond to Marquis Crazy Lion with his battle achievements. Soon, all the warriors were summoned and began to prepare to set off, sending troops to the territory of Marquis Raging Waves. Before setting off, Alan also received help from Marquis Crazy Lion, a full 5,000 elite warriors. Soon, Marquis Crazy Lion led everyone towards the territory of Marquis Raging Waves, leaving only a few hundred people to guard Flying Swallow City. The marching speed of an army of 50,000 people was bound to be slow. Alan didn't care about this. He rode the Silver Moon Wolf and walked slowly with his men. "Boy, where did you get this magical beast?" Before long, Marquis Crazy Lion, with an envious expression, walked over and stared at the wolf cavalry behind Alan, his eyes even turning a little green. Alan felt a little creepy. "Lord Marquis, this is a pack of wolves that I subdued unintentionally," Alan said casually. "Your luck is too good, it's so good that it makes me jealous." Marquis Crazy Lion touched the male lion he was riding. This was also a magical beast, but it was just one. There was no way to gather dozens of them. The more he came into contact with Alan, the more Marquis Crazy Lion felt that Alan was far more excellent than he had imagined. "My luck has always been good." Alan didn't pretend to be modest. He probably understood the Marquis's temper. He spoke directly, without beating around the bush, and didn't like hypocritical people. The group arrived at the territory of Marquis Raging Waves from Flying Swallow City on the evening of the second day. With an army of 50,000 people attacking, the news couldn't be concealed at all. Therefore, when they entered the Marquis's territory, large swaths of small towns, villages, and cities were already empty. Alan didn't find this strange at all. War was all about speed. If Marquis Raging Waves still hadn't made any preparations after so many days, then this Marquis was definitely an idiot. "Lord, there are troops on the plains ahead, and the number is not small. It should be the main force of the entire Marquis's territory." Alan leaned against the Silver Moon Wolf. At this moment, the army had stopped advancing. What Alan could know, naturally Marquis Crazy Lion also knew. He ordered the entire army to rest and prepare for a face-to-face confrontation with the other side early tomorrow morning. Alan naturally had no objections to this. Early the next morning, Alan had already led his men into battle mode. This was the first time since he arrived in the Blue Moon Duchy that he faced the opposing army head-on. At this moment, his men were positioned on the left side. He squinted his eyes and looked at the opposite side, estimating there were about 30,000 troops. For the glory of the Blue Moon Duchy. For the glory of the Ryan Duchy. In an instant, a roar erupted from both armies. The two marquises had already soared into the sky. Their power was simply too great. If they were to fight in the center of the battlefield, it was estimated that no one present besides them would survive. "Slaughter the Blue Moon Duchy scum for me. Charge. Let the Ryan Duchy dogs know who the master is here." The two marquises roared, simultaneously ascending into the sky. Powerful Do-Chi energy erupted from their bodies. Even at a great distance, the energy radiating from their clash in the sky caused a slight tremor. "Everyone, listen up. Follow me and charge." Alan drew his knight's sword, patted the Silver Moon Wolf beneath him, and immediately led the cavalry to charge forward. Soon, the entire battlefield became a chaotic mess. The battle of 80,000 people was simply a hellish meat grinder. Kill. At this moment, Alan had a full 7,000 men. Although this was less than 1/10 of the 80,000, the combat power they unleashed was unparalleled. The warlord Halo instantly doubled, or even more, the combat power of these 7,000 men. They were unafraid of death, fearless of pain, and could even automatically recover their stamina and wounds. Their fighting spirit was unprecedentedly united, forming a pressure that made the enemy feel despair. With just one engagement, the Blue Moon Duchy soldiers in front of Alan's army were vulnerable and instantly collapsed. "Follow the Lord. Kill them all." Viscount Tai Mu and the others immediately entered a bloodthirsty state again. They already had many wounds on their bodies, but they felt no pain at all. They seemed to be demons from hell, reaping heads. Poochie. A Blue Moon Duchy soldier thrust the spear in his hand into the body of a Ryan Duchy soldier. The Blue Moon soldier revealed a hint of a smile, but his smile froze on his face before it could fully bloom. The Ryan Duchy soldier he had stabbed simply pulled out the spear from his body as if nothing had happened. He didn't even frown throughout the entire process. Blood slowly flowed from a considerable wound in his abdomen. But none of this affected the Ryan Duchy soldier's attack. He fiercely slashed the guy who had stabbed him to the ground with his sword. At the same time, when he slashed the Blue Moon Duchy soldier, an invisible force quickly began to stop the bleeding and slowly heal the wound. How is this possible? The Blue Moon Duchy soldier couldn't believe it until his death that he would encounter someone who seemed to have no sense of pain at all. This was not the first case. Many Blue Moon Duchy soldiers who fought against Alan's men had encountered such things. They discovered that even a fatal wound might not be able to directly kill a Ryan Duchy soldier. The other party seemed to be demons, always delivering a fatal blow when they thought they had won. Devils. No, they are not humans, they are demons. Monsters, they are monsters. Immortal monsters. Soon, an army that fought against Alan's troops was directly defeated. Alan took advantage of the victory to pursue and began a round of slaughter. He even began to enter other battlefields. As long as there were enemies, Alan would go up and get involved. Until the other party was slaughtered, and then he would take his men to the next battlefield. He slaughtered too fast, too ruthlessly, too terribly. Alan's troops were like the sharpest sword, able to tear through the enemy's most solid defense and able to slash the most powerful enemy to the ground. In just 1 hour, Alan had swept across half the battlefield, and it looked like only about 10,000 troops of the Blue Moon Duchy were left. Damn it, what happened? A Blue Moon Duchy earl noticed something was wrong. Nima, why did it feel like there were more and more Ryan Duchy soldiers around him? He immediately came back to his senses and took a look, and his eyes widened immediately. Why are there only half of the people left? At this moment, Alan was killing happily. Wherever he passed, all the Blue Moon Duchy's troops were crushed to pieces. Like the god of war appearing in the world, wherever the sword pointed, he was invincible. P.S. Ask for flowers, ask for self-order. Chapter 82 Assassin and Anti-Kill subscription required, monthly ticket required. Several earls of the Ryan Duchy were originally fighting happily with the earls of the entire Blue Moon Duchy, but now they heard what the other party said, and they immediately came back to their senses and quickly looked at the surrounding situation. If they didn't look, they wouldn't know, but when they looked, they were shocked. They found that the other party's army was really half less. More than 10,000 Blue Moon Duchy soldiers had already fallen on the battlefield forever. And they also saw Alan's unstoppable appearance. That's Baron Alan. Garrick widened his eyes. He had lived his entire life, and this was the first time he felt that there was something wrong with his eyes. The soldiers behind Alan were soaked in blood, and each one looked like a demon crawling out of a sea of blood, especially those pairs of red eyes full of killing intent. Even they were shocked when they saw it. I personally transferred those 5,000 people to him. Their combat power is absolutely not 690 possible to be so high. Looking at the powerful strength of the soldiers behind Alan, Garrick was a little dazed. If those guys weren't wearing badges engraved with their family's emblem, he would really suspect that this was not his family's army. Damn it, that's not right. Why are these little bastards like they've been injected with chicken blood under Alan's command, killing people when they block them, and killing gods when they block them, but when they are under his command, each one can't even reach half of their current combat power. Garrick felt a little depressed in his heart. Isn't this a large-scale double-standard scene? But as we can see, the soldiers under Baron Alan's leadership can indeed unleash more powerful combat power. An earl said with some astonishment. Number 51 to 51. Soon, smiles appeared on their faces. Clearly, Alan's performance was enough for them to end this war much sooner. Now, all the Golden Knights of the Blue Moon Duchy were entangled by them. As long as they had a little more time, the Blue Moon Duchy's forces would be slaughtered to the last man. In fact, when a third of their army had already been wiped out by Alan and the others, the Blue Moon Duchy's soldiers were already on the verge of collapse. The fact that they could hold on until now without running away was already a testament to their immense courage. Damn it. There's something wrong with that guy. A Blue Moon Duchy earl's expression turned slightly ugly. What are you waiting for? If you don't act, all our warriors will be buried here. This Blue Moon Duchy earl suddenly roared at the battlefield below. Immediately, 3 terrifying auras erupted simultaneously from 3 directions not far from Alan. 3 men wearing ordinary warrior armor suddenly erupted with the aura of golden knights. In an instant, the 3 simultaneously approached Alan, who was rampaging on the battlefield. HMPH, impatient fools. If we had been given a little more time, this little guy wouldn't even have had time to react. The 3 men held short swords in their hands, their figures ghostly and their speed extremely fast as they arrived in front of Alan. Clearly, if the Blue Moon Duchy earl hadn't become impatient, these 3 could have delivered a fatal blow to Alan from a closer distance. Damn it. Assassins. 7th level assassins. Garrick's face changed. On this continent, dochi and magic are the mainstream methods of cultivation, so knights and mages are also the mainstream professions. However, mainstream doesn't mean everything. Besides knights and mages, there are many other professions in this world. Such as alchemists like Nick, and assassins like the ones in front of Alan now. Assassins are a profession whose main purpose is assassination. Powerful assassins can assassinate Saint Realm experts. It can be said that the most terrifying profession in this world is the assassin. They don't fight you head on, but entangle you like a lingering ghost, like your shadow, making you unable to sleep or eat in peace. Of course, most people would never know that they were being targeted by an assassin, because they would have already died silently before they even noticed the assassin. This profession in the shadows requires superb killing skills, terrifying concealment techniques, and so on. Their training is always focused on how to kill someone with the most ruthless and swift means. Of course, they also cultivate do-chi, but they spend more time cultivating physical strength, because many killing techniques require them to have a strong and flexible body to perform. The appearance of the 3 assassins instantly dimmed the entire battlefield. A trace of shock, anger, and worry flashed in the eyes of Earl Garrick and the others. At this moment, even if they wanted to provide assistance, it would be absolutely too late. Boy, you can die in peace. The 3 assassins assassinated Alan from 3 directions. Also 7th level experts, the full force strike of 3 7th level experts proficient in assassination would make even Alan feel a slight sense of crisis. If it were an ordinary 7th level knight, being assassinated by 3 assassins of the same level in this situation, even if they didn't die, they would definitely be seriously injured. But Alan was clearly not an ordinary person. After a slight surprise, his expression immediately became calm. Soon, in the shocked gazes of everyone, Alan disappeared. Then, in the next second, he appeared behind an assassin, a trace of killing intent and coldness flashing in his eyes. When the shadows of darkness charge towards the sun, they have already lost. You guys, assassinate me. Are you worthy? Alan swung the knight's sword in his hand, and instantly an assassin's head flew up with a stream of scarlet blood, with an expression of shock and horror still on his face. This powerful assassin would not understand until his death why Alan could instantly appear behind him from in front of him. 4. The pupils of the other 2 assassins shrank suddenly at this moment. They only had time to make a terrified dodging action before Alan directly split them in half with a sword each. 3 7th level experts appeared like meteors, dazzling and shocking, but they could only be fleeting, dying under Alan's sword. Alan calmly returned to the back of the Silver Moon Wolf and commanded his men to once again slaughter the remaining Blue Moon Duchy warriors. At the same time, he also looked back at the Blue Moon Duchy's earls, whose faces were ashen. He curled his lips and gave them the middle finger. Is your Blue Moon Duchy only capable of these underhanded methods? The Blue Moon Duchy's earls were so angry that they wanted to vomit blood, but at the same time, they were extremely shocked by Alan's battle just now. They simply couldn't imagine that someone could counterattack in such a desperate situation. It can only be said that no one would have thought that Alan possessed a high-level dragon nest, which he could enter and exit at any time, avoiding the assassin's attack. Damn it, who is this monster? The Blue Moon Duchy's earls thought with ugly expressions. Oh, He's just a small town baron, but thanks to your duchy's selfless contribution, this baron will soon become the new rising star of the Ryan duchy. After seeing that Alan was not only not killed, but also neatly resolved the 3 7th level assassins, Garrick was completely in awe of Alan. If he had been assassinated, he would definitely be dead by now. No wonder the Marquis admires Alan so much. P.S. Second chapter, Fresh Flowers, and All Data. Chapter 83 Duke and Dragon. Closing parenthesis. Boom boom boom. Alan glanced at the earls in the sky above. He did not take action to compete with them for the heads and war merits, but focused on leading his people to sweep across the entire battlefield. Half an hour later, all the Blue Moon Duchy's forces were completely annihilated. I'm afraid even Earl Raging Tide didn't expect that the elite troops he had cultivated couldn't even last 2 warriors in front of Alan. At the same time, the Battle of the Earls in the Sky was also nearing its end. Originally, the Ryan Duchy had more earls than the other side, so it was natural that the side with more people would win against the side with fewer people without a doubt. Alan flicked the knight's sword in his hand, shaking off the blood on it. At this moment, he was riding a silver moon wolf that had already been dyed red with blood, standing on top of a small hill composed of corpses. His whole body had been dyed red with the blood of the enemy, which made him lose his usual gentle sunshine, leaving only a strong killing intent and fighting spirit. Soon, the Blue Moon Duchy's earls were besieged by Garrick and the others and died on the spot. At this moment, the only one still resisting in the entire Marquis territory was probably Marquis Raging Tide, who was further away. Alan looked at the extremely distant place in the sky where 2 figures emitting golden light were constantly fighting in the sky. From time to time, Do-Chi aftershocks spread around them. The movements of the 2 people were extremely large. Even on the ground far away from them, they could hear the sounds of their fighting. Alan narrowed his eyes and began to mutter in his heart. Marquis Mad Lion is a 9th level expert. The one who can fight him like this must also be a 9th level knight. The movements of these 2 marquises are not small, and at the same time, they have no intention of stopping at all. The 2 people seem to be evenly matched. If this continues, I don't know if they can fight until the end of time. Of course, Alan didn't want to wait too long. He curled his lips, then circulated his Do-Chi and howled at the sky. Marquis Raging Tide, your men have been completely wiped out by us, you can surrender. Alan's voice accompanied by Do-Chi rose all the way into the sky. Soon, Alan's voice rang in Marquis Raging Tide's ears. Marquis Raging Tide was immediately distracted and looked down. Well, it would have been better if he hadn't looked. As soon as he looked, this slightly old Marquis almost vomited blood. He saw Alan piling up the corpses of the Blue Moon Duchy's warriors into a pile, and this kid was roaring at him on top of it. This made Marquis Raging Tide's face change, and at the same time, his entire state of mind shattered. Marquis Mad Lion raised his eyebrows slightly. Without saying a word, he seized this opportunity and began to hammer Marquis Raging Tide violently. Soon, Marquis Raging Tide was caught in a disadvantage. Alan nodded in satisfaction. This was good, this way he could quickly enter the Marquis territory's big city and search it thoroughly. Just as Marquis Mad Lion was about to kill his opponent, suddenly a force that made everyone terrified soared into the sky from the distant capital. Roar. A dragon roar that Alan was familiar with could be heard. Alan's face changed suddenly, and he saw a huge figure rising into the sky at the edge of the sky. It had a slender and scaly giant body. After a pair of dragon wings were opened, they were a full 100 meters wide. This was a dragon. A blue dragon. It exuded a dense water element power. At this moment, water element powers condensed around it to form huge water thorns that shot out from the edge of the sky in an instant, appearing in front of Marquis Mad Lion in the next moment. Marquis Mad Lion's face changed slightly. The whole person roared, and the Do-Chi on his body erupted, vaguely forming a golden lion that wrapped him inside. Soon, the water thorns collided with the golden lion. Boom! In the sky, a huge roar sounded, and Marquis Mad Lion fell from the sky in a slightly disheveled state. Lord! Garrick and the others' faces changed suddenly. On the one hand, it was because of Marquis Mad Lion, and on the other hand, it was because of the appearance of the dragon in the sky, and the Saint Realm expert on its back whose aura was extremely terrifying. In the entire Blue Moon Duchy, there is only one person qualified to ride a dragon. He is the Blue Moon Grand Duke. Only this ruler of a country is qualified to ride a dragon, because he himself is a dragon knight. A dragon knight who is powerful enough to support a country. Blue Moon Grand Duke. Marquis Mad Lion spat out a mouthful of blood, and his face became a little ugly. He didn't expect that this Blue Moon Grand Duke would be so shameless as to attack him. Alan looked at the Blue Moon Grand Duke riding the dragon in the sky, and his expression became slightly dazed. Too handsome. At this moment, Alan's inner thoughts were that it was too handsome. More handsome than imagined. Is this a dragon knight? The feeling of riding a legendary creature, the dragon, and overlooking the world, that feeling is too cool. Alan couldn't help but feel a trace of fiery emotion in his heart. This reminded him of when he had ridden Safi in the dragon nest before. That feeling was still retained in his heart, never forgotten. Number 52 to 52. HMPH. Ants of the Lane Duchy, who gave you the courage to act presumptuously on the land of my Blue Moon Duchy? Grand Duke Blue Moon's tone was domineering and cold. He looked down at everyone from above, as if looking at ants. Blue Moon, I thought you would continue to cower in the royal capital. What's this? You old turtle dares to show your face. Just a few breaths after Grand Duke Blue Moon appeared, another terrifying aura appeared in the sky behind Alan. Alan turned his head and immediately saw another dragon, a scarlet dragon emitting flames. The magic of the fire element revolved around the dragon, and Alan could feel the terrifying temperature of those flames. Fire dragon and water dragon. Alan raised his eyebrows slightly, a look of anticipation on his face. Originally, he thought that he and the others would need to approach the royal capital of the Blue Moon Duchy to meet Grand Duke Blue Moon. Only then would they be able to end the battle. But Alan didn't expect that everything would develop faster than he imagined. From the appearance of Grand Duke Blue Moon to the appearance of Grand Duke Lane now. The two dragon knights who founded their countries confronted each other, their auras soaring to the sky. It seemed that a dragon battle that would determine the victory or defeat of the national war was about to begin. Everyone retreat. Marquis Mad Lion's expression changed slightly, and he asked people to retreat gratefully. Although the dragon battle was a miracle that countless people wanted to witness with their own eyes, not everyone was qualified to watch this sacred and magnificent battle of dragon knights. Because people who are not strong enough can be killed just by getting close. The confrontation at the Saint Realm level is extremely terrifying, with the power to destroy the world with every gesture. Moreover, they are all dragon knights, so even Marquis Mad Lion, who is already at the 9th level, only wanted to do one thing at the first moment, and that was to get as far away as possible. P.S. Chapter 3, Please Give Me Flowers, Monthly Votes, and All Data. Chapter 84, The Fall of the Dragon, The Hidden Function of the Advanced Dragon Nest. Please subscribe and vote monthly. Lane. Decades ago, I said that I would definitely defeat you. Grand Duke Blue Moon was wearing a blue knight's armor. This was a magic knight's armor, with powerful magic applied by powerful magicians. The knight's armor was extremely expensive, made from precious resources born in the dragon's nest, the most suitable knight's armor for dragon knights. Grand Duke Blue Moon looked proud. Now he had broken through his previous realm and possessed even more powerful power. This powerful power gave him enough confidence to challenge Grand Duke Lane. The Dragon Knight battle is the final battle that can truly determine the outcome of the national war. Alan watched the confrontation between the two powerful Dragon Knights from afar, and a trace of longing inevitably arose in his heart. Blue Moon, you've broken through. Grand Duke Lane was wearing Red Knight's armor, which matched the attributes of his flame dragon. It was also a Dragon Knight's armor. But it's just a breakthrough. Do you really think you're sure to win? Grand Duke Lane said calmly, even with a bit of disdain and ridicule in his tone. HMPH, Lane, the Saint Realm and the Saint Realm are different. Grand Duke Blue Moon's tone was cold, and a trace of fighting intent gradually flashed in his eyes. His aura became stronger and stronger, so strong that the entire island began to feel a terrifying pressure spreading. The entire island began to tremble slightly, and waves began to roll on the sea. Ignorance. Grand Duke Lane said lightly, and his aura also began to skyrocket. The two dragons began to roar. The two Grand Dukes, conversation ended here. The two dragons began to approach each other rapidly, frantically using water and fire magic around them. At the same time, the two dragons also began to fight each other. And the two Grand Dukes went all out, attacking one after another. Boom, boom, boom. The surrounding plains and mountains were directly devastated and fragmented by the two of them. Powerful aftermaths of the battle spread out, and many warriors of the Lane Duchy suddenly turned pale, and some even began to vomit blood. Continue to retreat. Everyone below level 7 retreat. Marquis Mad Lion immediately asked people to retreat again. This was a battle between dragon knights, not something that everyone could watch. Those below Gold Knight level were likely to die in the aftermath if they were not careful. How is it possible? You have also broken through to the 2-star Saint realm. Subscribe to Chinese novel audio wave. Grand Duke Blue Moon's horrified and fearful voice came. His voice was full of unwillingness and despair. I said it a long time ago, do you think you are invincible after breaking through? Your cultivation is not worth mentioning in my opinion. Grand Duke Lane was covered in red flames, and with a slash of the long sword in his hand, he directly slashed Grand Duke Blue Moon from the sky. I'm not reconciled. Grand Duke Blue Moon was struck by a sword and spat out a mouthful of blood. At the same time, his water dragon spat a blue dragon breath at Grand Duke Lane. Grand Duke Lane did not dodge or avoid it at all. A red dragon breath blocked the blue dragon breath. The next moment, the fire dragon instantly appeared next to the water dragon and bit its neck. Suddenly, the water dragon let out a painful roar, and dragon blood spilled all over the earth. This scene shocked the earls and marquises present. The battle between the dragons, full of magic and hand-to-hand combat, made people feel inexplicably shocked. This feeling was even more shocking than watching the battle between the two Grand Dukes. Dragon battle. A trace of shock flashed in Alan's eyes. In the battle between the water dragon and the fire dragon, it was obvious that the fire dragon had won. The water dragon fell to the ground with a wail. In the sky, Grand Duke Lane stared calmly at the dying man and dragon on the ground. A trace of pity flashed in his eyes, of course, not for Grand Duke Blue Moon, but for the water dragon. If he didn't know that a dragon only acknowledges one person and their bloodline descendants in its entire life. Dragons are proud, and their pride would absolutely not allow them to betray their master, even if they knew it meant death, they would not retreat. Roar roar. The water dragon struggled to crawl to Duke Blue Moon, who was already beginning to lose his life, and collapsed beside him. Boom. After a final wail, the water dragon's body crashed to the ground, blood gushing out incessantly, slowly losing its life. The dragon war is over. Marquis Mad Lion's eyes flashed with a hint of shock and sigh. Alan looked at the water dragon in the distance, a trace of regret flashing in his eyes as well. Such a magnificent dragon just died like that. However, soon, something shocking happened to him. After the dragon's corpse completely lost its life, it began to dissipate rapidly, turning into streaks of light blue and disappearing. Only some of the hardest bones remained in place. Ding! High-level dragon nest detected a strong dragon power, absorbing it. While Alan was shocked by the rapid dissipation of the dragon's body, the system prompt in his mind began to sound. Dragon power. Alan was ecstatic. At this moment, his system's high-level dragon nest actually had this function. Alan's expression remained unchanged, trying to maintain his composure, but his body unconsciously moved closer to the water dragon's corpse. The dragon power was quickly absorbed by the high-level dragon nest, all sent to Safi. For Safi, this was simply a great fortune. While his high-level dragon nest was silently absorbing the dragon power of a dragon, Duke Ryan slowly withdrew his regretful gaze. Duke Ryan knew that dragons would quickly dissipate after death, leaving only the most solid part of their bones. He didn't care about this at all. Of course, he didn't know that not far away on the ground, a small baron was secretly absorbing those scattered dragon powers. Fergus. The war can be ended, lead the warriors to sweep through the Blue Moon Duchy. You have performed well this time, especially, you, Baron Alan. Duke Ryan slowly sat on the back of the fire dragon, his eyes falling on Marquis Mad Lion and Alan on the ground. As for the others, they had been completely moved away from here. Duke Ryan looked at the people below with extremely satisfied eyes. Especially Marquis Mad Lion and Alan. Duke Ryan had already arrived, just waiting for Duke Blue Moon to make a move. He had seen Alan's performance very clearly. Moreover, in the past period of time, he also received a letter from his eldest son, Liner, which also focused on mentioning Alan. Alan was slightly stunned when he heard this, but then he showed some smiles. "This is my honor and mission," Alan said with a smile. "Very good, everyone, take your warriors and start the final battle. Within 3 days, occupy this place, and I will be in the capital to welcome you." After Duke Ryan finished speaking, he waved his hand, and the dragon bones on the ground disappeared in place, while he rode the fire dragon towards the Ryan Duchy. P.S. Chapter 4, Street Book Data. Chapter 85 Dragon Blood Soil, Support Albert. Watching Duke Ryan leave on the dragon, a trace of yearning rose in Alan's heart. This is the life he wanted. How majestic and cool would it be to ride a dragon every day? As Alan thought, Marquis Mad Lion beside him glanced at him. "Don't look, little guy, is this the first time you've seen the Duke riding a dragon? Don't be too envious and yearning. After all, the Duke is a dragon knight, the top powerhouse on the continent. Such an existence is only the Duke in our duchy." Marquis Mad Lion showed an expression that said, "I understand you." He patted Alan on the shoulder. "With your talent, it may not be impossible to become a Saint Realm powerhouse, but it is too difficult to become a dragon knight. Don't daydream." Marquis Mad Lion said here, showing some emotion. "Looking at you, I think of when I was young. Who didn't want to be a dragon knight? It's just that I didn't have the strength." After Marquis Mad Lion finished speaking, he said to him, "All right, Alan, your current goal should be to lead your men and horses to sweep through the other 2 marquisate with me." Alan nodded when he heard this. "Of course, but I think the warriors can take a good rest for a while. My warriors fought bravely and are very tired. Of course, there are 3 earldoms and 1 marquisate around here. I'll give you, kid, an earldom to take your men and horses to collect wealth and benefits alone." Marquis Mad Lion said to Alan. "As for the others, follow me. Garrick, you are too embarrassing for me. You are all earls, but you are not as good as a 16-year-old baron in leading troops to fight. HMPH, you few people will divide the remaining 2 earldoms." Marquis Mad Lion's smile immediately disappeared after leaving Alan's sight, leaving only a face of contempt and disappointment. Garrick opened his mouth, but in the end, he could only lower his head and respond to Marquis Mad Lion's decision. There was no way. Alan's performance shocked everyone. Even Duke Ryan was very optimistic about Alan. What could they do? Soon, Garrick and the others recalled the army, but they didn't all head towards the 4 cities. Instead, an earl stayed behind with half of the people and began to dig soil. Number 53 to 53. Yes, that's right, it's digging soil, digging up the soil stained red with dragon blood. Alan was shocked, but he quickly received an answer from a count who had stayed behind. "This is dragon blood soil, Alan. Your previous title was too low, and you were too young, so naturally you wouldn't know the value of this dragon blood soil." That count was specially left behind by Marquis Crazy Lion to dig soil, which shows how much Marquis Crazy Lion valued this dragon blood soil. You should know that dragons are a perfect creature. They are powerful and can provide us with a constant source of resources and wealth. Anything related to the word dragon is a treasure, let alone dragon blood. This dragon blood soil is extremely beneficial to plants, especially magic plants. Dragon blood contains rich magic power, a power unique to dragons. This power can transform magic plants. Even using dragon blood soil to cultivate the main body of a nature spirit plant can greatly increase the probability of the nature spirit advancing to a fairy. Anyway, dragon blood is definitely a treasure to us. Listening to the count's words, Alan suddenly showed a look of realization. That's right, in this world, anything related to dragons is definitely a good thing. Seeing Alan's gaze gradually becoming fiery, the count smiled. "Don't worry, a portion of this is yours. After all, you are a great contributor." The count revealed a hint of a smile. "Then thank you very much," Alan said with a smile. Alan didn't leave immediately. He had Marco and Viscount Tiamu take people to Earlstown first. At this time, they had to get to Earlstown as soon as possible. Otherwise, it would be too wasteful if those people reacted and the treasure was gone. Before, in Swift Swallow City, it was like that. Earl Swift Swallow's family ran away with the fairy nature spirit in advance, resulting in Alan only finding some gold coins when he arrived. Now, he didn't want this kind of thing to happen again. After sending Marco and the others away, Alan also sat directly on the ground, waiting for news of the advanced dragon nest. Now that there was still a lot of dragon power CFBH permeating the surroundings, he certainly couldn't waste it. He chatted with the Count who stayed behind for a while. Soon, the system prompted that the power of the dragon had dissipated completely. Only then did Alan ride the silver moon wolf and leave quickly. Soon, Alan caught up with Marco. Half an hour later, he led his men into that earl's town and planted the thorn flower banner all over the city. While searching for wealth, Alan unexpectedly discovered that Earl Swift Swallow's family was also in the city. This made Alan happy. It was like searching high and low without success, only to have it delivered right to his door. He originally thought that they had already escaped to the capital, but he didn't expect them to escape here, and they brought a fairy and 3 nature spirits. This made Alan feel great. He already had 2 fairies. Adding the one originally in this earl's town and the one in Swift Swallow City, he had obtained a total of 4 fairies. 4 fairies from a national war, plus the harvest of 4 nature spirits, made Alan truly satisfied. Alan didn't sweep the surrounding small nobles again that day. After all, his soldiers were already very tired. After experiencing a high-intensity life-and-death battle, everyone, both physically and mentally, seemed extremely exhausted. Alan had people prepare a sumptuous dinner and then let them rest for the night. The next morning, when everyone had recovered almost completely, Alan led his men to sweep the small nobles around the earl's territory. For the whole day, all the nobles, big and small, in the Marquis territory were swept away by Alan and the others. The next day, Alan received a notice from Marquis Crazy Lion, asking him to send troops to another Marquis territory to support the war in other Marquis territories. This was good news for Alan. At this moment, his merits had reached nearly 500,000 points. For Alan, the more merit points, the better. Leaving behind 1,000 men to continue sweeping the remaining small nobles, Alan led the remaining 6,000 men to support other battlefields. Because they had continuously occupied enough territory, Alan and the others easily gathered the warhorses for 6,000 people. To be precise, it should be warhorses for 5,000 people. After all, every one of Alan's soldiers had a warhorse or a silver moon wolf. With the warhorses, the mobility of the troops was greatly enhanced. What originally took more than 3 days, Alan and the others arrived in just 1 day. When he arrived, he happened to see Earl Albert leading his men fighting with an earl from the Blue Moon Principality. Alan, of course, rushed up without saying a word to steal the kill. "Everyone, charge for me." Alan waved his hand, and a sword aura burst out, heading towards the Earl of the Blue Moon Principality in the sky. Chapter 86, Gathering, Shocking Achievements. Albert was slightly stunned. In an instant, Alan's sword aura had passed Albert and slashed fiercely at the Earl on the opposite side. Swish! Alan's sword aura was originally the strongest among his peers. Even an 8th level knight had to pay attention to the sword aura converted from his fighting spirit. The knight from the Blue Moon Principality was obviously an 8th level knight. After all, it was unlikely that someone who could fight back and forth with Albert was not at the 8th level. But even such an 8th level knight had his left arm suddenly chopped off by Alan's sword when he wasn't paying attention. Ah, ah, ah. The knight from the Blue Moon Principality suddenly turned pale and wailed in pain. Albert was also not polite and directly started to kick a man when he was down. Alan naturally didn't want this 8th level knight to be killed by Albert. Compared to a 7th level knight worth 10,000 merit points, an 8th level knight was worth 50,000 merit points. With such a large amount of merit points in front of him, Alan's attack was also extremely ruthless. He used the Wind Duke sword to the extreme. At the same time, Alan also used the swordsmanship he had comprehended. Alan was originally the strongest among his peers. His combat power at full strength was comparable to an 8th level knight. The 8th level knight from the Blue Moon Principality had originally lost an arm, and now he was equivalent to being besieged by 2 8th level knights. Even if he had great abilities, he could only die here. In just a few moves, Alan successfully beheaded the Earl and earned 50,000 merit points. On the ground, Alan's men were also extremely ferocious. They were all screaming and killing, making the soldiers of the Blue Moon Principality, who were originally evenly matched with the Ryan Principality, feel terrified. Where had they seen such a brutal opponent? Each of them had red eyes. Being slashed once or stabbed once didn't seem to bother them at all, and they waved their hands to stab them back. They were too ruthless. These people were simply devils. It was originally a small-scale battle. The other side only had about 7,000 or 8,000 people, and they were quickly defeated by Alan's men, throwing away their helmets and armor. Alan sheathed his sword and bowed slightly to Albert, "Father." Albert looked at Alan with some complexity. The current Alan was completely different from the immature little guy he was back then. At this time, Alan was so powerful that he could already fight side by side with him. The troops he brought out seemed to be a pack of wolves and tigers, capable of fighting 10 against 1. In addition, Alan had just come out after recuperating in Earl's town, and his energy and spirit had reached their peak. His whole body gave people a dazzling feeling. "Alan, it seems that this national war has made you grow a lot." Albert's tone was serious with a hint of relief. "It's not just war that has made me grow," Alan said lightly. He looked at the battlefield below. At this moment, Marco and the others were chasing after the fleeing soldiers, carrying out a massacre. Marco also seems to have undergone a huge change, but it's all good in the end. I heard that you solved Marquis Raging Tide in advance, and that you brought out Grand Duke Blue Moon. Grand Duke Ryan had a Dragon Knight battle with him. Albert and Alan slowly landed from the air. The two of them did not attack ordinary soldiers, but instead returned to their respective mounts to chat. Seeing Alan's mount, Albert felt a burst of helplessness in his heart. As an earl, he was still riding a warhorse, but his son was riding a handsome magical beast. Damn it, he suddenly felt that his magical beast mixed blood warhorse was not so good anymore. Albert's heart slightly felt the sourness that Elon had felt back then. Ahem, Alan, do you still have any silver moon wolf cubs in your territory? Albert opened his mouth with some embarrassment. Alan shook his head. There are no cubs for the time being. Alan directly purchased the magical beasts from the system. Where would there be cubs? I see. A hint of disappointment flashed in Albert's eyes. But I can give you 2 silver moon wolves, you can try to cultivate cubs. Alan certainly knew what his cheap father was thinking. That's great. Albert's eyes lit up. But father, you also know the preciousness of magical beasts, especially tamed magical beasts. Alan changed the subject and said to Albert, you also know that I have set up some factories, and there is a large shortage of manpower. The hint in Alan's words made Albert smile slightly. There is no need to worry about the manpower problem at all. When you return to the country, you will almost be able to be promoted to Viscount. The population and territory will be expanded and increased. At that time, I can give you a large number of people. Speaking of this, Albert couldn't help but feel some emotion. His originally unremarkable son had actually become his most outstanding son. That's good, thank you, father. Alan smiled slightly, but in his heart, he sneered at the title of Viscount. Viscount. I want to become a count. Soon, Marco and the others had almost slaughtered all the soldiers of the Blue Moon Principality on the scene, and returned with a murderous aura. Okay, let's go. Alan, Prince Rainison and Princess Raina often mention you, come with me to meet them. Albert tidied up his mood and said to Alan, it's an honor. The group headed into the distance. Soon, Alan saw the prince and princess whom he had not seen for a while, flowers. At this moment, these two no longer had the relaxed and comfortable feeling they had at the beginning, but instead gave people a sense of fatigue. This is Seagull City, an Earl's town in Marquis Tigershark's territory. Number 54 to 54. It seems that with the backing of Marquis Crimson Flame, Albert and the others are progressing quickly. They've swept through several earldoms and entered a marquisate, even seizing an earldom city. Oh, Baron Alan, it's a pleasure to see you. I heard you've achieved a great victory. I knew I hadn't misjudged you. Prince Linarson revealed a smile upon seeing Alan. Alan smiled slightly, thank you for your praise, your highness. It's just good luck. Ha ha ha, it's not just about luck with you, kid. A familiar, rough voice rang out, and a tall, burly man appeared behind Alan. It was none other than Marquis Mad Lion. Beside him was a middle-aged man with red hair. Marquis Mad Lion, Marquis Crimson Flame. Alan bowed slightly to the two men. The man who could stand next to Marquis Mad Lion, and who also had bright red hair, who else could he be but Marquis Crimson Flame? So you're Alan. I've heard nothing but praise for you from Prince Linarson and that old codger Mad Lion. Marquis Crimson Flame looked at Alan with a hint of curiosity in his eyes. Alan's expression remained calm and collected. That's just the appreciation of His Highness and Lord Marquis Mad Lion. Hey, no need to pretend, kid. Before my support arrived, you led less than 3,000 men and flattened 3 earldoms. Based on that alone, you deserve to be made an earl. Marquis Mad Lion's words immediately shocked everyone around him. Even Albert's eyes changed. Alan actually flattened 3 earldoms on his own. Not just him, everyone showed a shocked expression. P.S. First chapter, self-subscription, all data. Also, I still have to say something here, I'm really sorry. I was too busy yesterday, and only looked at the book review area today. And found that many people said that the update is less, actually. This update is not less, in fact, the number of words per day now is almost the same as the previous 7 chapters, plus. I have no manuscripts after I put it on the shelves, so recently there are 5 chapters guaranteed, and only when there are manuscripts, can there be 6 chapters, 7 chapters, but 6 or 7 chapters a day can't last too long, because it's too tiring, but occasionally it can still explode. Don't worry, coding is really a bit difficult. Rice smile. Also, thank you for your support, thank you. Chapter 87, The National War Ends, The Invincible Lord of the Silver Wolves. An earl. The people present twitched at the corners of their mouths. They looked at the young man in the crowd who could talk and laugh with the Marquis. Was this young man about to be made an earl? Albert was dumbfounded. He was the most shocked, because he was Alan's father, and he was also a participant in this war. Only those who have participated in the war know how difficult victory on the battlefield is. Albert had 20,000 men, and it was difficult to take down even one earldom. Alan took down 3 earldoms with 3,000 men. What does it mean to have no harm without comparison? This is it. What made Albert even more dumbfounded was that Alan had already reached the level of being made an earl. God, damn it, this kid is only 16 years old. Oh, damn it, at 16 he already has 7th level strength, and he has flattened 3 earldoms alone, then wouldn't he have gained 3 fairies? Damn it, I was in my 30s when I had a fairy, when I had 7th level cultivation, and when I had enough military merit. Countless thoughts flashed through Albert's mind, and in the end, he could only accept the fact that Alan was about to become an earl. At least for now, it seems that the first prince and Marquis Mad Lion are very optimistic about Alan. Alan, you are even more outstanding than I imagined. Linarson said with a smile. Yes, he is the most outstanding young man I have ever seen. Your Highness, let's go into the castle and chat while drinking. Marquis Mad Lion said. Yes, that's right, we need to hold a banquet for the arrival of Marquis Mad Lion and the others. Linarson nodded, and the group entered the castle. Soon, wine, roast meat, bread, caviar, and cheese were brought up. Because of Linarson and Marquis Mad Lion, Alan had become the focus of everyone's attention. Many minor nobles, and even earls, came to talk to him. Alan seemed very calm and answered fluently. Soon, the banquet came to an end. After all, it was still wartime. Although the Grand Duke of the other side had hung up, as long as there were forces resisting, this war could not end. After a short period of happiness, Alan returned to his room to rest. The next morning, the battle began. With the 2 marquises, the line army broke through the marquisate like a hot knife through butter, and Alan once again gained a large amount of merit points. At this moment, his merit points had reached nearly 800,000. After breaking through the second marquisate, most of the minor nobles in the entire Blue Moon Principality had given up resistance. The only one who still wanted to resist was the last marquis of the Blue Moon Principality. Originally, there was a marquis from the Line Principality dealing with him, and now, with the addition of Marquis Mad Lion and Marquis Crimson Flame, who had solved their respective opponents. The 3 marquises joined forces, and the other party had no room to resist and was wiped out. Alan gained nearly 300,000 merit points again when dealing with the 3rd Marquis of the Blue Moon Principality. At this moment, his merit points had reached a massive 1.1 million. This number is still increasing. Because this is only the largest island in the Blue Moon Principality, and there are still some resisting forces of the Blue Moon Principality at sea, Alan's sea cavalry has not been idle. After 2 consecutive large-scale searches, the number of warriors under Alan's command had expanded from 6,000 to a full 30,000. Because everyone had discovered in the battlefield that Alan's warriors, under his leadership, were always the most formidable fighters on the entire battlefield. They were fearless, charging forward with unwavering courage, like devils from hell. Several marquises were very surprised by this. Of course, everyone had personally witnessed Alan's strength in these 2 large-scale battles. He and his troops were simply invincible on the battlefield. They were unstoppable, and no one could stand against them. Gradually, Alan gained the recognition, and even the awe, of all the nobles. By the time the national war was completely over, the rumor that Alan was favored by the god of war had spread among everyone. Some even called Alan the invincible lord of the Silver Wolf. Because Alan possessed a powerful wolf cavalry, many people referred to Alan as the Lord of the Silver Wolf. After completely occupying the Blue Moon Principality, the national war also came to an end. With the war over, Alan and his men would return to their territory. Baron Alan, we will soon meet in the royal capital. Prince Reinert waved to Alan, and soon most of the people boarded ships and began to leave the territory of the Blue Moon Principality. Only about 30,000 troops were left here to guard against people from other countries causing trouble. Having contributed the Blue Moon Principality, this place was now the territory of the Lionheart Principality. No one else could be allowed to act presumptuously. Alan, on the other hand, boarded a sailing ship and slowly headed towards Rose Town. There were 33 masted sailing ships traveling to and from Rose Town. Of course, 10 ships would have been more than enough to carry the men and horses. The surplus 20 ships were filled with Alan's spoils from this campaign: gold coins, gold and silver jewelry, magical materials, potions, magical plants, and so on. All of them were valuable items. Of course, this was not everything. A portion had already been stored by Alan in his item inventory. These were just a portion of the wealth brought out to deceive people. In fact, Alan's true gains were far greater than everything in front of him. Soon, with the help of the sea lion beasts, they arrived at Rose Town in just 1 hour. After returning to Rose Town, Alan immediately had the plant bodies of the nature spirit and the fairy planted in pots first. As for aquatic plants, Alan could only release them into the seawater near Rose Town. He did not plan to immediately use the expensive dew of nature to restore the elves' vitality. Because he was about to be promoted to a noble rank, he would have a new, magnificent castle. When the time came, he would bring the plant bodies of these elves over to plant them well before using the dew of nature to restore their vitality. As for now, they could only be inconvenienced for a while longer. When the townspeople saw Alan and his men returning, they immediately took the initiative to welcome them along the road. Alan responded with a gentle smile to express his gratitude. Soon, boxes of gold and silver jewelry were moved into Alan's castle. After leaving a few gold coins, Alan put everything else into his item inventory. The first thing to do upon returning was, of course, to get a good rest. This national war had lasted nearly a month, and traveling throughout the Blue Moon Principality to fight was somewhat mentally exhausting for Alan, so after returning, Alan let all the returning warriors relax for a few days, and he himself slept comfortably. He didn't wake up until noon the next day. The first thing to do after waking up hungry was naturally to eat something. The second thing was to call the treasurer, Sparrow, to the castle. Having been away from Rose Town for some time, Alan naturally needed to carefully check the situation of Rose Town. Chapter 88, Hero's Family, Yearning of the Nature Spirit. My lord, I am relieved to see that you are safe and sound. Sparrow immediately showed a smile upon seeing Alan. His small mustache twisted with the exaggerated and excited expression on his face, making him look very comical. Sparrow, thank you for your concern. Now you need to tell me how the town is developing, and how my factories are doing now. Alan drank milk and ate toast. He didn't want to eat anything too greasy in the morning. Oh, my lord, you don't have to worry about the town at all. The town is developing very well. More and more merchants are now trading in our Rose town, and many large chambers of commerce also want to cooperate with us, but I refused. This requires you to decide. As for our factories, most of them have been built, and half of them have already started operating normally. Our production has achieved a leap-forward increase. Look, this is the financial report for this period. After deducting all costs and workers' wages, our net profit has reached 200,000 gold coins. This hasn't even been a month, and we already have 200,000 gold coins. Sparrow immediately became animated when he talked about his area of expertise. Good, Sparrow, you have done a great job. Continue to maintain development. In addition to the factory issues, you also need to pay attention to the town's issues at all times. After Alan finished speaking, he waved his hand, signaling Sparrow to leave. Then he summoned Marco. As his strongest subordinate, Marco was also the one in charge of the entire town's armed forces. Marco quickly arrived at the castle. "My lord, you summoned me." Marco said softly to Alan. "Number 55 to 55. Yes, Marco, I want to know, how many warriors returned alive?" Alan's tone was slightly heavy. After all, his warriors had not yet gained immortality. The battlefield was a meat grinder. Even if Alan possessed a powerful skill like the Lord's aura, he couldn't guarantee that all the warriors could return alive. In fact, that was indeed the case. His warriors did not all return alive. Reporting, "My lord, of the 800 cavalry, only 621 returned. More than 100 people have been left forever on the land of the Blue Moon Principality." Marco's tone also became heavy, but he was already very satisfied with this number. The casualty rate of Alan's warriors was less than a quarter, which was already a very small number on the entire continent. As Marco, who once followed Earl Albert in battle, he knew the terror and cruelty of the battlefield. Every charge on the battlefield carried the possibility of death. A large-scale battle might have a casualty rate of half, or a third. And that was just one war. Like this national war, they followed Alan through no less than 20 battles, large and small, and only lost more than 100 people in those 20 times. This was simply a miracle. Marco recalled his state during the battle. It was completely beyond his usual state, as if in an instant, a continuous stream of power erupted from his body. Marco was also very puzzled about this situation, but he didn't ask Alan anything. There was no need to ask, this must be a gift from the god of war. Well, provide 50 gold coins as compensation to the families of the fallen warriors. Record the names of these warriors' families and compile them into a roster for me. Alan was silent for a moment, then said, "Also, announce that the families of the warriors who died on the battlefield will have their annual taxes reduced by half. In addition, they can enjoy the title and treatment of heroes' families." Alan expressed some of his ideas, which were of course Alan's summaries based on some of his previous life's viewpoints. After all, he was not a truly cold-blooded lord. He also had feelings, and he could understand the pain and suffering of losing loved ones. He would not watch the families of the warriors who risked their lives for him live without security after their deaths. The heroes' families will be taken care of by me, Alan, and all my subordinates on behalf of those warriors. As long as I am here, no one can bully them. After Alan finished speaking the last sentence, Marco was already extremely moved. He looked at Alan with a moved expression. "My lord, it is truly the glory of those little rascals to be able to serve you." Alan waved his hand. "All right, you can go down first and solve the problems I mentioned. As for the money, go find Sparrow." After Alan finished speaking, he continued to eat, while Marco immediately nodded and left. "My lord, you are truly a benevolent lord." Butler Edward showed a smile on the side. "Grandpa Edward, how can there be any benevolent lord in this world? I am just doing things with my conscience. They died for me, so I can't ignore their families." Alan shook his head and sighed. "By the way, Grandpa Edward, how have Emmy and Tara been recently?" Alan hadn't seen his nature spirits for a while. "Oh, my lord, they are very well, all very healthy, but recently these little guys seem to be a little unhappy. I think they must be starting to miss you." Butler Edward sighed with a smile. "Oh, really? It seems these little things still have some conscience." Alan showed a smile. After nature spirits sign a contract with humans, they will develop a certain emotional dependence on humans. If they don't see their master for a long time, the nature spirits will naturally be unhappy. Alan had just said this when he saw a nature spirit fly out of the room. It was Tara. Subscribe to Chinese novel audio wave. After she saw the familiar figure in the living room, she immediately let out a scream. Voila! Then she rushed into Alan's arms at the fastest speed. She seemed very excited, constantly calling out, "Voila, voila!" Following Tara's cries, soon, all the other nature spirits ran out from all corners of the castle. Emmy and the others also quickly flew to Alan's side, and a group of beautiful and lovely little things began to cheer and get close to Alan. Alan could only stop eating and start to be intimate with these 8 little things for a while. Looking at this group of beautiful and lovely little fellows, Alan's originally somewhat heavy mood suddenly dissipated. After playing with the nature spirits for a while, Alan returned to the study and began to do the thing that made him most excited and anticipated. That was to spend the merit points. At this moment, he had a full 2 million merit points. 1,100,000 of which he obtained on the battlefield, and the remaining 900,000 were extra rewards given by the system after evaluating Alan's performance after the end of the National War. 2 million merit points, this could allow Alan to buy a lot of good things. More new books. Identify the first release Flying Lu Group. 6566188896, 6566188896. Chapter 89. Buy Acceleration Card, Holy Elf Lucy. Subscription, self-subscription, monthly pass. Skillfully opening the system interface, Alan clicked on the workshop. At this moment, the National War had ended, and his work remained at a little over 2,007,000. Being able to reach this position was far beyond Alan's previous expectations. According to the previous idea, training acceleration cards are a must, which can only allow my territory's military force to be rapidly improved, and also prepare for the next war. As for the nature spirits, there is no urgent need, but I already have fairies. I can get a holy fairy to see what the situation is. I don't seem to have heard of anyone in the Ryan Principality having a holy fairy. The rest is experience points and creatures that can be considered, no need to consider gold coins. Alan thought in his heart, and first clicked on the chapter of acceleration cards. The higher the level of the acceleration card, the more cost-effective it is, so definitely buy the highest level. Alan swiped to the Advanced Knight Training Acceleration card. Looking at the price of 400,000 merit points, he felt a little heartache in his heart. Buy Advanced Knight Training Acceleration card. Alan took a deep breath and purchased a High Knight Training Speed Up card. This was a necessity for a lord, judging from the situation of the 10 knights Alan had trained previously. This Knight Training Speed Up card was even more valuable than Alan had imagined. Because the knights it trained weren't the kind without any potential, unable to improve further. Instead, they were knights who could cultivate, take magic potions, and become stronger through training. This was undoubtedly extremely terrifying. You must know that Earl Albert had been an earl for over 20 years, and now he only had a knightly order of several hundred people. Most of them were bronze knights, and only a very few elites could enter the ranks of silver knights. This meant that as long as Alan used the Knight Training Speed Up card, he could surpass Earl Albert, who had 20 years of experience, in terms of martial strength within just a few weeks. This speed was simply unimaginable. 400,000 merit points, exchanged for 1,000 knights with potential, saving decades of time. It's not a loss, Alan thought, putting away the Golden Knight Training Speed Up card. Next was the Warrior Training Speed Up card. The Knight Training Speed Up card required the user to reach the level of a warrior first. To Alan's relief, the Warrior Training Speed Up card was much cheaper than the Knight one. Purchase 10 High Warrior Training Speed Up cards. Alan's merit points decreased by another 400,000. However, his inventory now contained 10 Light Purple Warrior Training Speed Up cards. Next, let's take a look at the Nature Spirit chapter. Alan smiled. He now possessed 4 fairies and 12 nature spirits, completely outnumbering Albert. Of course, this was also what he deserved. After all, during the National War, his contributions were definitely among the top 5. Including the 3 Marquis Lords. Originally, I was thinking of buying fairies, but it seems I don't need to buy them. 4 fairies are enough for my current situation. Then, directly a saint fairy. I want to see what a saint fairy is. Without saying a word, Alan directly spent 500,000 merit points to purchase a saint fairy. Immediately, a little bit of green light began to appear in front of him. Alan widened his eyes. He could feel that, in an instant, all the plants and magical elements on the surrounding land were cheering. And the fairies and nature spirits in his castle all stopped their actions in an instant, widening their eyes. The next moment, they all flew towards Alan's study. The entire Rose Town was affected at this moment. The crops that originally needed several months to harvest began to undergo huge changes at this moment. Wheat began to ripen, corn began to ripen, and all crops matured and bore fruit. Of course, the most shocked was Alan. In front of Alan, streaks of green life force quickly condensed, and the tall, perfect figure of a woman began to quickly outline in front of him. Countless flowers, plants, and trees appeared out of thin air beside her, and the rich life force made Alan feel refreshed. Soon, the entire study seemed to have become a garden. The green light began to gradually dissipate, and a girl with green hair and pointed ears appeared in front of Alan. Her pair of emerald eyes were pure and flawless, and her perfect face and golden ratio figure amazed Alan. "Is it you who summoned me?" The girl's eyes looked at Alan. Her bare feet stepped on the grass that appeared out of thin air in the study. Alan slightly regained his senses. "You are my saint fairy." Alan was a little surprised in his heart. He thought that the nature spirits were just small, but he didn't expect the saint fairy to be almost the same size as a normal person. Saint fairy. Yes, I have this name in my mind. The girl leaned slightly closer to Alan. She closed her eyes and felt it gently, and then showed a happy smile. "That's right, it's your scent. I remember this scent, waking me from the chaos. Are you my master?" The saint fairy girl's small face was about to stick to Alan's face. It seemed that this girl had a good impression of Alan. Alan took a slight step back embarrassedly. When this girl appeared, she only had some green leaves covering her body. How could her graceful figure be covered by these thin green leaves? It's not that Alan hadn't seen beautiful women before. Whether it was Anna from the Roland Chamber of Commerce or the Grand Duke's little daughter, they were all beauties. But compared to this nature spirit girl, they were completely unworthy. Pure and ignorant eyes, gentle and friendly natural aura, coupled with perfect appearance and figure, this woman was simply a treasure of the world. Being so close, Alan would naturally feel a little restrained. "If there are no accidents, I am your master. My name is Alan, what about you?" Alan said to the nature spirit girl. I don't know. I just woke up from the chaos and don't have a name." The nature spirit girl shook her head slightly. "Then I'll give you a name." Alan looked like he was used to it. He had named so many nature spirits, and he said he had no pressure. "Okay." The nature spirit girl showed a smile. Wang Nuo's, she took a step back slightly, tilted her head and looked at Alan, waiting for Alan to give her a name. Alan didn't think much, and he quickly said with a smile, "You will be called Lucy." The nature spirit girl immediately nodded. "Okay, my name will be Lucy from now on." Lucy happily jumped around in the entire room. "Lucy, can you restore this room?" Alan then opened his mouth with some headache. I'll restore it here now." Lucy nodded obediently. She waved her hands slightly, and immediately the flowers, plants, and trees in the entire room began to slowly turn into strands of green light and dissipate. This scene slightly surprised Alan. The saint fairy seemed to be more than just cultivating crops. Lucy could completely control a special force, and could manipulate the feeling of any plant. Number 56 to 56. What surprised Alan the most was that she could conjure plants out of thin air and make them disappear without a trace. Could this power be considered magic? Chapter 90, Lucy's Ability, Biological Chapter. Self-subscriptions. As Lucy transformed the plants into specks of green light and dispersed them, the study regained its original appearance. Alan wanted to chat with Lucy for a bit when he heard a series of noises outside the door. Emmy. Walla. Hoo. The voices of the nature spirits echoed incessantly outside the door, the little fellows still knocking excitedly. Alan could vaguely hear Edward the butler's voice outside. "Little ones, don't knock. The master is thinking inside." "Oh, my little ancestors. Old Master Edward was at his wit's end. Even the naughtiest Emmy in Terra wouldn't usually make such a fuss. As the butler, he had the most contact with the nature spirits besides Alan. These adorable little fellows treated him well and were willing to listen to him, but he didn't know why. These beautiful little ancestors were particularly active and rowdy today, and they all started causing trouble outside Alan's study. This gave Edward a headache. Creak. The originally closed door suddenly opened, and Alan's figure appeared in everyone's eyes. "Oh, Master, I'm sorry, I couldn't stop them." Butler Edward immediately bowed to Alan and said, "It's all right, Grandpa Edward, these little fellows' behavior is not a big deal, and it didn't affect me," Alan said with a slight smile. He opened the door, allowing the fairies and nature spirits to fly in. A group of beautiful and adorable nature spirits immediately surrounded the fairy Lucy and began to flutter around her. Even the few fairies and nature spirits who had just arrived at Alan's castle were the same, even though they still looked listless. Hoo. After circling Lucy a few times, the nature spirits immediately began to approach her, some sitting on Lucy's shoulders, some lying in Lucy's arms, or grabbing Lucy's hair and swinging. This lady is. Butler Edward was shocked by the scene in the room. Besides Alan, he had never seen these little fellows be so affectionate with anyone else. "Grandpa Edward, her name is Lucy. She will live with us from now on. Find a few maids to take her measurements and make some clothes for her," Alan said with a smile. Butler Edward then slightly recovered and looked at Alan with a smile on his face. "As you wish, Master." There was a hint of a smile in Butler Edward's tone. After speaking, he gently leaned closer to Alan and said, "Master, you have a good eye. This lady is CFBH the most beautiful girl I have ever seen in my life." Old Butler Edward gave Alan a little encouraging look, and then left very happily. Soon, a few maids came up with rulers and measured Lucy's figure. Throughout the entire process, the maids were in a state of shock. They had never seen such a beautiful woman with such a perfect figure. So good that it made people jealous. Even the middle-aged maids couldn't help but feel jealous. After the maids left, Alan originally wanted to take Lucy to a new room, but Lucy looked at the few fairies and nature spirits that Alan had snatched from the Blue Moon Principality with a serious expression. "Alan, they seem very uncomfortable." Lucy hugged a few little fellows, a look of sympathy on her face. They have recently transplanted their plant bodies, so they are a bit listless now. I have already arranged for someone to buy natural dew. After a while, they will be able to recover," Alan said with a helpless expression. He couldn't do anything about moving the bodies of these little things. I can help them." Lucy smiled. After speaking, the nature spirit girl placed a finger on a fairy's head and gently tapped it. A green light flashed for a moment, and in an instant, the fairy, who had been looking listless, suddenly became energetic. "Kula!" The fairy cried out in surprise, and then snuggled up to Lucy's face and became very intimate. Giggle. Lucy was amused by the fairy and laughed happily. Alan was shocked. As expected of the holy fairy. Damn it, he hadn't even completely planted her plant body yet, so how did she recover her vitality? Too incredible. Soon, Lucy touched all the nature spirits one by one. Immediately, the cheers of the nature spirits in the entire room became even louder. "Lucy, I forgot to ask you, you are also a nature spirit, don't you have your own plant body?" Alan looked at Lucy surrounded by a group of nature spirits, as if she were a fairy among nature spirits, and a question suddenly arose in his mind. Unlike ordinary nature spirits, the holy fairy directly appeared in Alan's study. Alan would not forget how shocking the scene was when Lucy came out. It was as if the entire nature had descended into this small study, and Lucy had walked out of nature. Impossibly beautiful, but the resulting doubt was that Alan didn't seem to see the holy fairy's body. Body. Lucy tilted her head and thought, "No body, I am the body. Number plant body." Alan was slightly surprised. The holy fairy had already transcended the identity of a plant, and had obtained enough sublimation. She no longer needed to be limited to a plant body, but was an extension similar to the will of nature. Alan thought to himself, and soon he stopped dwelling on this issue, because it was useless to dwell on it anyway. What needed to be considered now was how to ensure that Lucy's identity was not discovered by others. Just like dragons, saint fairies are rare existences. Before Alan is strong enough, he needs to keep a low profile. Alan first had people tidy up the room next to his, making sure it was well prepared. From now on, it would be Lucis' room. As for exploring Lucis' abilities, Alan didn't think it was worth rushing. He would wait until he had completely used up his merit points before slowly studying Lucis' abilities. After settling Lucy down, Alan looked at the system interface again. The Knight Acceleration card, Warrior Acceleration card, and Saint Fairy cost him a total of 1.3 million merit points. Now he only had a little over 700,000 merit points left. There are still enough merit points. Besides experience points, I can also look at other chapters. Alan took a deep breath and turned his gaze to the biology chapter. Originally, Alan thought he wouldn't have too many merit points, so he planned to solve the most important resources first. Now that the Knight Training card, Warrior Training card, and Spirit of Nature had all been purchased, and Alan still had a lot of money left, he naturally wanted to take a look at the biology chapter as soon as possible. Having experienced the National War, Alan could clearly feel how fortunate it was to have magical beast cavalry. And wolf cavalry was only a mid-tier magical creature. Even so, the wolf cavalry shone brightly in the National War. This further strengthened Alan's emphasis on magical creatures, even higher-level creatures. With 700,000, I could even buy a dragon, but the dragon species has already been unlocked. It's more cost-effective to buy with gold coins. There's no need to look at ordinary magical species either, since it will be easy to find bones and fur to unlock species in the future. Then the scope is much smaller. Focus on ancient magical species and overlord-level species. A hint of excitement arose in Alan's heart. Chapter 91, Purchasing Species, Top-Quality Magic Plants. Self-Orders. Behemoth, Overlord Creature, 400,000 merit. Giant, Overlord Creature, 250,000 merit. Treant, Ancient Magical Creature, 10,000 merit. Griffin, Magical Creature, 8,000 merit. Minotaur, Elite Creature, Orc Species, 100 merit. Centaur, Elite Creature, Orc Species, 100 merit. Soon, Alan had selected several species that he preferred. Having the Sea Lion Beast and Silver Moon Wolf, Alan now possessed naval and land combat power. However, the Silver Moon Wolf was only an ordinary magical creature, while the Behemoth and Giant races were overlord level. Among them, the Behemoth was known as the King of Land Warfare, with a huge body, terrifying strength, and extremely strong defense. This kind of magical beast had no problem conquering cities. With a behemoth in hand, Alan wouldn't need to wait for the enemy to leave the city in future wars. The behemoth could directly flatten the city gates. The behemoth's title of King of Land Warfare was not for nothing. It was just that this overlord creature seemed to have disappeared from the continent. Alan had never heard of a behemoth's presence anywhere before. To purchase a creature, the King of Land Warfare, Behemoth, was definitely worth Alan's purchase. As for the remaining giant species, Alan didn't particularly need them at the moment, so he skipped it. Alan felt that the treant species was still useful. After all, the building materials in this world were stone and wood, and having treants would be very convenient. The griffin was selected by Alan to make up for his lack of aerial combat power. After the sea cavalry and wolf cavalry, Alan also wanted to establish an aerial cavalry, which was the griffin cavalry. Although he hadn't encountered opponents with aerial power yet, that didn't mean he wouldn't encounter them in the future. The last Minotaur and Centaur were species that Alan had selected later. Originally, Alan didn't plan to select species below the magical species level. However, these two species made Alan's heart flutter a little. Minotaurs had strong physiques and strength. Whether as warriors or laborers, they were excellent choices. Centaurs, on the other hand, came with sharpshooter genes. Each one was a good archer, possessing great strength and swift speed. Alan's territory lacked archers, and centaurs were a good choice. For various reasons, Alan included these two species in his selection as well. Soon, Alan purchased the behemoth, treant, griffin, minotaur, and centaur. Of course, in response to Alan's, what he obtained this time were directly creature cards. If they appeared directly in the castle like Lucy, Alan felt that his castle might be scrapped in advance. Ding! Congratulations to the host for unlocking the overlord species Behemoth. Reward: Behemoth *10. Ding! Congratulations to the host for unlocking the magical species treant. Reward. Treant *50. Ding. Congratulations to the host for unlocking the magical species griffin. Reward. Griffin *50. Ding. Congratulations to the host for unlocking the elite species minotaur. Reward. Minotaur *200. Ding. Congratulations to the host for unlocking the elite species centaur. Reward. Centaur *200. A series of prompts sounded, and a trace of a smile appeared on the corner of Alan's mouth. The system was considered smart, directly unlocking the species he purchased. The remaining 300,000 merit points will all be exchanged for experience points. Finally, Alan no longer needed to consider anything else and exchanged all the merit points for experience points. After all, Alan himself needed some improvement. Only strong strength was the foundation for survival. In the merit shop, the exchange rate of merit for experience was 10-1. Alan directly obtained more than 30,000, close to 40,000, experience points with the remaining merit points. He was still more than 60,000 experience points away from leveling up once. Alan exhaled a breath. Now there were no merit points left in the merit shop. They had all been transformed into Alan's power. Number 57 to 57. Alan believed that with this harvest, he could develop even better. What Alan needed to do now was wait for news from the royal capital. After all, he just needed to be promoted to the title of nobility to complete the main quest. Alan estimated that he would receive the Grand Duke's summons in the next 2 days. Not all nobles could have the opportunity to enter the royal capital, only those who had made great contributions to the war were qualified to meet the Grand Duke. Before the summons arrived, Alan focused all his energy on the holy fairy Lucy. Lucy's clothes were quickly made, designed according to the style of a noble lady. The already beautiful Lucy looked even more elegant after putting on the tailor-made clothes. Amy, the spirit of nature, Amy, was swinging on Lucy's hair. Lucy didn't dislike the mischievous ghost's behavior at all, she even liked it very much. Seeing this, Alan couldn't help but be a little captivated. The scene was just too beautiful. The beautiful girl and the beautiful spirit of nature together were like the most exquisite painting. Alan, Amy said she likes you and me the most, Holy Fairy Lucy suddenly smiled and said. Alan smiled slightly upon hearing this. He walked forward, rubbed Amy's little head, and then said to Lucy, Lucy, you are the Holy Fairy. Your arrival has shortened the maturation time of all the crops in my territory by several months. Do you have any other abilities? This was what Alan was more concerned about. As for abilities, I can make those plants better. Lucy frowned slightly as she spoke, but she seemed to have some difficulty expressing her meaning clearly, looking a little troubled. Alan smiled. He had Tara cultivate an ordinary wheat plant and then said to Lucy, try to make it better. Lucy nodded immediately. Her emerald green eyes looked at the wheat in front of her, and then something that stunned Alan happened. The ordinary wheat instantly became thick and strong. Yes, how thick? Have you ever seen wheat as thick as an arm? Haven't seen it, right? Alan saw it. The wheat, which was originally a foot tall, instantly became as thick as an arm and half a person tall. The ears of wheat were excessively full, with each grain the size of a chicken egg. What shocked Alan the most was that this was not an ordinary plant. This wheat was magic wheat, and the concentration of magic power completely exceeded that of the magic wheat cultivated by the spirit of nature. Alan even felt that it exceeded the magic power of the fairy's magic wheat. A special fragrance emanated from the wheat. Alan's throat moved. He reached out, picked a grain of wheat, and put it directly into his mouth. In an instant, a warm current entered his body. The wheat melted quickly in his mouth, and a sweet taste instantly bloomed in his mouth along with enormous energy. Alan's eyes widened, and his whole person was petrified. After a long while, he slowly recovered. This, 1 grain of wheat is equivalent to a high-level magic potion. Alan had not drunk a high-level magic potion, but he had taken a mid-level magic potion at Thornflower Fortress. He clearly remembered the medicinal power of the mid-level magic potion. At this moment, the magic power contained in 1 grain of the magic wheat in front of him directly surpassed the medicinal power of a mid-level magic potion. This is definitely a high-level magic potion, right? He turned to look at Lucy, his eyes turning green. This is a peerless treasure. A few. Chapter 92, Lucy's Superpower, the arrival of the court knight's self-subscriptions. Lucy, come, show me all the abilities you have today. Alan silently put away the huge wheat plant. This thing was simply unheard of, a top-quality magic plant. He dared to bet that in the Lionheart Principality, only he, Alan, had seen this kind of top-quality magic plant. Even the Lionheart Grand Duke had never heard of him having a holy fairy. Originally, Alan wasn't too eager to know how powerful Lucy's abilities were. But after seeing this 12-star enhanced perverted magic wheat, Alan decided that he must thoroughly understand Lucy's abilities. This was simply a huge treasure trove. If he didn't understand Lucy's abilities, how many good things would Alan miss? Lucy was stunned. My abilities. Let me think, I can make this little guy grow bigger. Lucy pointed to Amy beside her. Grow bigger. Alan was stunned at first, and then he saw Lucy holding Amy in both hands. Amy sat in Lucy's palm, humming comfortably. Lucy's hands emitted green light, and soon, Amy exclaimed. Her originally small body actually grew larger. Amy, Amy. Amy jumped up in Lucy's hand in shock. The green light in Lucy's hand dissipated, and Amy immediately bounced up. She flew around Lucy and Alan extremely excitedly. Alan almost popped his eyeballs out. This can evolve the spirit of nature. Subscribe to Chinese novel Audio Wave. While Alan was shocked, Amy, after showing off triumphantly, immediately went to find her old opponent, Tara. These two little guys were like rivals, they had often fought since they met. There had never been a winner or loser, but now it was probably different. Amy's whole body was a circle bigger, which was obviously the largest in the spirit of nature. Without saying a word, this little thing rushed towards Tara. The two little things immediately started fighting. The final result was obvious. Tyra was clearly losing and immediately flew to Alan and Lucy for protection. Emmy. Little Emmy immediately became smug, placing her hands on her hips and laughing heartily. Walla walla. Tyra pouted her little mouth and called out to Alan and Lucy with a grievance. Alan felt a little sorry for her and flicked Emmy's head, glaring at her. Don't bully Tyra. Lucy smiled, however, reaching out to hold Tyra. Don't be sad, I'll help you grow a little bigger. As she spoke, she repeated her previous action, making Tyra a little bigger as well. Alan was slightly silent at this scene, and then said, Lucy, is it a burden for you to make them grow bigger? Are you tired? Lucy released Tyra into the air. Without a word, Tyra rushed straight towards Emmy, revenge. It's not a burden at all, and I'm not tired either. If I wasn't afraid it would be detrimental to their growth, I could make them as big as Ada and the others. Lucy said with a smile. Ada. Fairies. Able to directly create fairies. Alan's breathing became slightly rapid, but he quickly suppressed his excited mood. Just as Lucy said, excessive growth for Emmy and the others would be more harmful than beneficial for the spirits of nature. Lucy told Alan that she could stimulate the growth of the spirits of nature every once in a while. This would allow the spirits of nature to grow quickly without harming their bodies. Alan strongly agreed with this suggestion. Just the ability to stimulate the growth of top-quality magic plants and turn spirits of nature into fairies was enough to make Lucy an existence that would drive the entire continent crazy. However, Alan felt that Lucy, as a saint fairy, definitely had more abilities than just these. Lucy, what other abilities do you have? Alan asked with a look of anticipation. I can improve the surrounding plant species, and I can stimulate the growth of any plant you want at any time. I can also take care of the crops in many places the size of Rose Town. As for others, I can't think of them for the time being. Lucy said somewhat embarrassedly. Alan smiled upon hearing this. It's okay, these abilities alone are already very powerful, and I believe you definitely have more than just these. Alan's words made Lucy smile. Yes, Lucy will work hard. After Alan and Lucy stayed for a while, they returned to the study. He was preparing to enter the dragon nest and cultivate with Safi. As soon as he stepped into the dragon nest, he saw the sky filled with the massive dragon Safi. Seeing that Safi had grown to a length of 70 to 80 meters, Alan estimated that after a period of time, once it had completely digested the dragon power of the water dragon absorbed by the dragon nest, Safi would be completely able to reach adulthood. With the advanced dragon nest and the massive dragon power, Safi's growth was already extremely fast. Looking at the soon-to-be adult Safi, Alan suddenly felt that keeping Safi locked up all the time was not a good idea. This dragon had hardly seen the outside world since birth. Alan decided that after Safi reached adulthood, he would regularly take it out to play. By the way, he would also familiarize himself with the life of a dragon knight. Safi, come down, let's start today's cultivation. Alan called out from the ground. Roar! Safi immediately responded to him with a loud cry. The blue dragon quickly landed beside Alan. Unlike the Blue Moon Grand Duke's water dragon, Safi was a gem dragon. In addition to her hard and beautiful dragon scales, some parts of her body were covered with a thick layer of blue gemstones. The grown-up Safi was becoming more and more handsome. Safi's huge dragon head nuzzled against Alan. If Alan wasn't strong enough, he might have been sent flying by this gentle nudge. Okay, let's start cultivating. Safi, you have to work hard to grow up. Once you reach adulthood, I'll take you out to play. Alan said with a chuckle. Safi's eyes lit up instantly, roaring loudly to express her excitement, and then began to cultivate with Alan. Soon, 2 days passed. During these 2 days, Alan had been in contact with Safi, Lucy, and Marco's sparrow. He took the time to inspect Rose Town. At this moment, the scale of Rose Town was no less than a small city, and it was developing extremely well. He had a huge stone tablet erected in Rose Town Square for the deceased soldiers, with the names of those deceased soldiers engraved on it. And he personally comforted the families of those soldiers. This allowed Alan to once again gain the love and admiration of everyone in Rose Town. Until the 3rd day, a team of court knights from the Lane royal capital entered Rose Town. They brought the Edict of Grand Duke Lane, inviting Alan to the royal capital to attend the celebration of this national war victory, and also to have Alan prepare to receive the title of nobility personally bestowed by the Grand Duke. Chapter 93. Fame spreads throughout the duchy, kneeling in welcome S for subscription, self-subscription. Lord Alan, your deeds have already spread throughout the royal capital. Your bravery, strength, and unparalleled command ability are a model for the entire younger generation of the duchy, and even for all nobles to learn from. The Grand Duke, Prince Reinerson, Marquis Crazed Lion, and Marquis Crimson Flame have all praised your excellence and strength more than once in public. Number 58 to 58. You have already become a star figure among the younger generation of the duchy. The people in the royal capital are overjoyed to hear that you are going to the royal capital to participate in the celebration and enfeoffment ceremony. Everyone is looking forward to your arrival. After all, you are a war hero, the invincible lord of the Silver Wolves. The captain of this small team of palace knights was a middle-aged man. As the Duke's guards, they were in constant contact with the upper echelons of the entire duchy. Originally, they should have been stern and unsmiling long ago. Even Albert probably wouldn't see a smile on their faces. However, these palace knights showed smiles to Alan, and their expressions were extremely respectful and humble. Captain Hans, your words make me feel uneasy. Alan said with a smile, I am not worthy of such great affection from the people of the royal capital. I am only contributing my strength to the country. This is the code of conduct for a knight: humility, loyalty, dedication. Alan spoke these beautiful words, but sneered in his heart. As the Duke's guard, Hans' every word and action represented Duke Ryan. If he showed even a hint of arrogance or rudeness, he might be directly blacklisted deep within the Duke's heart. It's impossible not to say some nice things. Oh, Lord Alan, you truly are an excellent knight. Hans was also very satisfied with this answer. Lord Alan, the message has been delivered, and it's about time for us to leave. You'd better prepare yourself. We'll meet in the royal capital in a week. Hans didn't stay too long and quickly left with his men. Alan watched their departing figures, a trace of contempt flashing in his eyes. You want to test me with your level of skill. Duke Ryan seems to be a person who likes to test others. Is this how all rulers of a country are? Alan stroked his chin, soon dismissing these thoughts from his mind. Anyway, he never intended to develop in the Ryan Duchy for too long. As long as his strength was sufficient, Alan would definitely not hesitate to rise up and establish his own country. Right now, his strength was not strong enough. At least he hadn't reached the Saint Tier Knight level yet, and Safi hadn't come of age either. It seemed he still needed to develop discreetly for a while. However, Alan was extremely excited about the enfeoffment ceremony. After all, this ceremony was related to his mission rewards. Lord, are you going to the royal capital to be enfeoffed? A hint of joy flashed in the eyes of the steward, Edward. Yes, Grandpa Edward, I am about to leave the Thorns and Flowers family. I will become a noble of the duchy with power, no longer a country baronet. Alan revealed a bright smile. Edward was immediately filled with emotion. If Madame knew of your current situation, she would definitely be proud of you. Edward's old face was filled with pride and self-satisfaction. Of course, Grandpa Edward. Alan revealed a slight hint of emotion, then he had people prepare to pack up, prepare some water and food, and also had people notify Marco. He also asked him to notify the wolf cavalry to gather. This time to the royal capital, whether Alan was willing or not, the presentation had to be maintained. As the invincible lord of the Silver Wolves on the battlefield, Alan naturally needed to bring his signature wolf cavalry. This was also to show his importance to the enfeoffment ceremony, giving Duke Ryan an attitude. Lord, this day has finally arrived. I once thought that glory had left me, but the Lord has allowed it to surround us again. Marco quickly arrived at the castle. He seemed very excited. Alan's promotion was accompanied by large tracts of land and a large number of people. This meant that Alan could also enfeoff his own nobles. For the first time, Marco felt that he was so close to the title of noble. Marco, don't be too surprised. Glory has never left, it just needs us to reach out and grab it. Our glory is more than this. Alan smiled indifferently, then began to instruct Edward and the others on some matters. Most of the things revolved around Lucy. Alan didn't plan to bring Lucy, because Lucy was too eye-catching. She was too beautiful, and her green hair and pointed ears would expose that she was not human. Of course, these could be covered up with excuses. But Alan's biggest concern was the exposure of Lucy's identity. In the bustling royal capital, if some sharp-eyed guys discovered Lucy's specialness, it would undoubtedly be a huge trouble for Alan. Lucy, stay at home and take care of the nature spirits and fairies. After I come back, I will take you to our new home. Alan said gently to the holy fairy girl. Okay, Alan, don't worry, I will definitely be obedient. Lucy nodded very obediently. Alan smiled reassuringly, then immediately walked out of the castle. Rosetown is located on the coast in the south of the duchy. Although it is not at the southernmost end, it is almost there. As a border noble, it takes a long time to travel to the royal capital each time. Otherwise, Duke Ryan would not have notified Alan and the others to go to the royal capital a week in advance. Soon, Alan rode the Silver Moon Wolf, leading the wolf cavalry away. As for the others, Alan asked them to guard the territory well. The speed of the wolf cavalry far exceeded that of ordinary cavalry. In addition, without the burden of other people, this time, Alan and the others arrived outside Thorns and Flowers City in just half a day. Like Alan, Albert also received an invitation from the royal capital to participate in the celebration and the enfeoffment ceremony. However, this earl seemed to be just going as a spectator. After all, Albert's contribution in this war was limited, not enough to support his promotion to Marquis. This time, as soon as Alan's wolf cavalry arrived outside Thorns and Flowers City, the Thorns and Flowers City gate had already been opened proactively. Now, the Silver Moon Wolf has become a symbol of Alan. Seeing the Silver Moon Wolf, everyone knows that it is the Silver Wolf Lord who dominates the battlefield. As the second son of the Earl and a prominent figure in the duchy, no one would disrespect him. Welcome, Lord Alan, the invincible Silver Wolf Lord, the nightmare of enemies, the Baron from Hell. Alan rode the Silver Moon Wolf into the city, and all the citizens knelt down to worship. This is awe and worship of the strong. The rules of this world are like this: the strong are high above, and the weak can only kneel and salute. The previous 2 times Alan came here, he did not receive such treatment, because the previous 2 times, Alan's identity was only the second son of the Earl. But now he is the invincible Silver Wolf Lord. He is a gold knight, a big figure who is about to become a noble of the duchy. Alan smiled, leading the wolf cavalry to receive everyone's kneeling worship, and slowly entered the Thorns Flower Castle. Chapter 94, The Prince Waits, Enjoy the Glory. Self-subscriptions. After the National War, the Thorns Flower Castle returned to calm. Without war, the Thorns Flower territory no longer needed to mobilize troops, supplies, etc. Everything returned to its most peaceful state. Originally located in the south, the Thorns Flower Castle could already feel a burst of heat, but as a coastal territory, the comfortable sea breeze could often dissipate some of the heat along the plains. Alan's silver moon wolf possessed magic, which could keep the surrounding temperature constant, allowing the wolf cavalry to maintain a comfortable temperature at all times. Alan rode the silver moon wolf into the Thorns Flower Castle under the gaze of everyone's worship. This time entering the Thorns Flower Castle, Alan also felt a huge difference. Unlike in the past when only Elon came out to greet him casually. This time, the Knights of the Thorns Flower Knight Order were already waiting for Alan outside the entire castle gate. Elon and Albert were leading all the female relatives to wait for Alan's wolf cavalry outside the main castle gate. "Alan, welcome to your arrival." Elon opened his mouth with a slightly complicated expression. During the National War, he had fought alone. Only after leaving Alan did he realize that war was not as simple as he had imagined. Following Alan, he thought that war only required charging and killing to win. But after leaving Alan, Elon discovered that his warriors were looking for chaos and lacked enough courage and order, making it difficult to win. This made him feel even more that his younger brother was powerful. "Elon, long time no see." Alan smiled slightly. Apart from the very beginning of the National War, he had not seen this cheap older brother for a long time. "Alan, it seems you have also received the Grand Duke's call-up order. Rest in the castle for a while. I'll have the servants prepare a sumptuous lunch. After eating, let's go together." Albert also received an invitation and naturally had to go to the royal capital. "Okay." Alan nodded. Soon, the servants began to get busy, and one sumptuous dish after another was brought up. The young maids kept flirting with the handsome Alan sitting at the dining table. And those female relatives who had originally disdained Alan were now frequently showing their goodwill to Alan. Several young ladies praised Alan, as if Alan was the eldest son of the earl. Alan's expression remained unchanged. He ate elegantly, chatting and laughing with Albert and Elon. He also brought the silver moon wolf that he had promised to Albert, which made Albert feel great. 2 hours later, Albert led a part of the Thorns Flower Knight Order and Alan's wolf cavalry together on the road to the former capital. 6 days later, they reached the royal capital. The Lanes Duchy is located in the southwest of the continent. Because it is close to the sea and has many rivers, the royal capital is also located near the largest lake in the duchy, Lake Kedar. Here, the rivers are crisscrossed and it is known as the River Plain. Here is an endless expanse of fertile land, with clear blue lakes, and the scenery is extremely beautiful. The royal capital is located here, and the tall city walls and the huge iron statues carved on the city walls give people a shocking feeling. When Alan and the others arrived at the royal capital, it was already afternoon. Outside the royal capital, a pair of court knights were waiting here. "Ha ha ha, Earl Albert, Baron Alan, long time no see." Prince Renaissance showed a bright smile when he saw Albert and Alan. This noble crown prince was actually enduring the heat to wait for the two at the city gate, which made Albert slightly moved, but he quickly understood that this prince was not waiting for him at all. This prince's gaze had been hovering almost entirely on Alan from beginning to end. Thinking about Alan's performance during the National War, Albert also knew in his heart that Alan was the one worthy of Renaissance, this noble figure, waiting at the city gate. "Your Highness, how long have you been waiting?" Albert quickly had people speed up to join Prince Renaissance's team. "His Highness has been waiting for you for a day, from morning until now." "You are too slow." Behind Prince Renaissance, a burly knight said with some displeasure. At the same time, he looked at Alan, who was riding the silver moon wolf, behind Albert with a slightly hostile gaze. "The invincible silver wolf lord, Baron Alan." The knight said with some hostility. "It's me, who are you?" Alan raised an eyebrow. He could naturally feel the other party's hostility. "Zell, step back." Renaissance frowned slightly and said, "This is a conversation between me and Baron Alan." Subscribe to Chinese novel audio wave. The knight named Zeller heard this and his expression changed slightly, but in the end, he respectfully retreated. "All right, you must be tired after traveling such a long distance. I have already arranged accommodations for you, please follow me. Lainison said, moving closer to Alan. Baron Alan, you are the main character of this celebration and ceremony. Can you guess how popular the invincible Lord of the Silver Wolf is here? Alan was slightly stunned when he heard this, I'm not too sure. Although Alan had heard the descriptions from the court knight Hans before, he had never been to the royal capital, so he naturally didn't know how popular he was in the royal capital. Since you don't know, then come and see with me. Lainison revealed a smile. With a wave of his hand, the city gate slowly opened. In an instant, the scene of the royal capital appeared in Alan's eyes. Invincible. Lord of the Silver Wolf. Baron Alan. Before Alan, countless young people were looking at his group with fervent eyes. Especially after seeing Alan riding the Silver Moon Wolf, everyone's attention was focused on him. Alan's already handsome face, coupled with the Silver Moon Wolf he rode and the trace of chilling aura accumulated on the battlefield, added a lot of masculine dominance to him. So handsome. Ah, so handsome. Lord of the Silver Wolf. My God, he looks exactly like my Prince Charming. Bah, shameless bitch, the Wolf Lord is mine. The prosperous royal capital, the wide and clean streets, the densely packed crowds on both sides of the street holding up the Silver Wolf pattern, the streets were filled with festive decorations for the celebration. Alan rode the Silver Moon Wolf, leading the wolf cavalry on the street. Countless young men and women cheered for him, and even many middle-aged men smiled at Alan and his group. Alan didn't expect that a country baron who had never been to the royal capital would have such high popularity in the royal capital. Moreover, when he arrived in the royal capital, not only was the prince waiting, but so many people came to welcome him. This made him a little confused. This wasn't Thorn's Flower City. How could the people here welcome him so much? Surprised. Ha ha ha, you are a war hero, young and promising, and powerful. In addition, you are a marquis, and even my father and countless warriors have praised you, so in a few days you have become an idol for young people. Lainison looked at Alan's confused expression and explained with a smile. You are heroes, and heroes should be welcomed and admired by the people. Alan, enjoy this moment, enjoy your glory, warriors. Lainison said loudly. This was what he said to Alan and all the warriors. P.S. Chapter 4. Monthly votes, and all data. Flowers and are free, you can vote more. I'm trying to write Chapter 5. As for why I don't update together, it's because I don't have any manuscripts. Don't look at me updating almost on time. That's because it takes me 2 or 3 hours to write a chapter. After all, it's not a full-time job, please understand. Chapter 95 Alan, am I so excellent that I have aroused public resentment? Custom. Amidst the countless cheers of the royal capital's commoners, Alan and his group slowly entered a detached courtyard near the palace. This was a residence specially built by the Duke for marquises or nobles who had made great contributions to the principality to prepare for their stay in the royal capital. The specifications and decoration are second only to the palace. The detached courtyard covers a very large area. After all, it is a residence exclusively for nobles. There are 5 independent courtyards inside and special maids and chefs to serve. Alan and Albert moved into one of them, and their subordinates rested in a barracks near the detached courtyard. You two, take a good rest first. The celebration is tomorrow, and the enfeoffment ceremony is also tomorrow. Have a good dream tonight. You can come to me if you have any needs. Lainison sent them to the detached courtyard and then prepared to leave, so as not to disturb their rest. Oh, right, before the celebration, the Marquis of Rose will hold a dinner party at the Marquise's castle tonight. My uncle specially asked me to invite you. If you are interested, you can go and see. I heard that many noble ladies will be there. Lainison revealed a meaningful smile. Alan was slightly stunned when he heard this. After Lainison left, Alan glanced at Albert, who looked eager, and said, Father, you don't want to go, do you? Alan is very clear about the essence of the so-called 707 noble banquet. Do you think it is a group of nobles elegantly chatting and communicating? Do you think it is just a few ordinary social dances? In fact, the essence of noble banquets is extremely depraved. The banquet is just an activity for a group of men and women to find their favorite opposite sex and hook up to bed. God knows how many noble ladies have already spent a good night with several noble masters. Alan is extremely disgusted with this kind of activity. But the nobles of this world are happy to do this. Even most of them are married noblemen and women looking for excitement. Looking at Albert's eager look at this moment, you know that as an earl, this noble master also likes this kind of activity very much. After all, those young and beautiful ladies in Thorn's Flower Castle were hooked up like this. Oh, Alan, you are already an adult, you need to learn to relax. Aaron is very skilled in this. I have never seen you attend any banquets since you were a child, and I have never seen you fancy any young ladies. Sometimes I really suspect that you have some unspeakable secrets. Albert coughed lightly to ease his embarrassment, and then spoke to Alan from his father's point of view. In his opinion, a normal noble cannot resist the stimulation of this kind of revelry. Hey, you can go if you want, I'm waiting for tomorrow's ceremony. Alan shook his head and returned to his room. Albert shrugged. See, you missed another wonderful night. Life needs a little excitement. This serious earl became less serious after his son had the right to speak on equal terms with him. When talking to Alan, Albert spoke more like someone of equal status. After all, Alan's power separated him from the Thorns family, so even if Albert was his father, he could no longer interact with him as a father. Alan returned to his room to rest, while Albert left the villa at night. Albert returned to the villa almost the next morning. After a night of revelry, Albert was still able to maintain vigorous energy with his powerful strength. Today is the beginning of the celebration and ceremony, which will take place at noon. Alan, wearing gorgeous clothes, went to the palace with Albert. At this moment, the entire royal capital had already begun to be noisy. The citizens began to celebrate, and Alan rode the silver moon wolf all the way to the palace. The celebration in the royal capital is naturally divided into two parts: the celebration for the common people outside the palace and the celebration for the nobles inside the palace. Of course, the nobles who can enter the palace are either high-ranking officials or people who have made great contributions. Alan belongs to the latter. Look who this is, the invincible lord of the Silver Wolf. Alan followed Albert into the palace. In a wide hall, he saw the nobles and servants coming and going. Many people had already arrived here, and the one speaking was Marquis Crazy Lion, whom Alan was familiar with. Lord Marquis, I didn't expect you to arrive so early, Alan said softly. Of course, I am very much looking forward to this celebration. Marquis Crazy Lion looked at Alan with a strange look in his eyes. Oh, does your lordship seem to have something to say? Alan raised his eyebrows slightly. Albert, didn't you tell him? Marquis Crazy Lion was also stunned, and then looked at Albert and said. Alan was also stunned and looked at his father. Well, I forgot, but it's not a big deal. Albert said, patting his head. Alan, at the Rose Marquise's banquet last night, besides the noble ladies, there were mostly young knights from various places. They all thought you would attend the banquet and were prepared to challenge you at the banquet. But you didn't go, which made them wait all night, so they all made a statement that they would come to challenge you at today's celebration. As for the reason, you should be able to guess it. You are now a national idol figure, with extremely high popularity, and you will soon have extremely high status. Under this circumstance, yesterday when you entered the city, the entire street was crowded with common people who wanted to see you, and even His Royal Highness the Crown Prince personally went out of the city to meet you. These things, such great glory, have aroused jealousy in those young guys, and even some old guys. In short, it's because you are too good, so good that others feel unreal and jealous. So a large group of people are thinking about challenging you, because defeating you means glory and great fame, and you also know that nobles value these things, Albert said simply. Alan touched his nose. So, my excellence has caused public outrage. Marquis Crazy Lion nodded. That's right, if I had met you when I was young, I would have wanted to fight you. I see, I understand. Alan nodded calmly. His full strength was comparable to an 8th level knight. There were not many 8th level knights in the entire duchy, most of whom were from the older generation. Alan didn't believe that these old guys would disregard their face and duel with him. As for the others, the youngest 8th level knights were in their 30s or 40s. Even if they were thick-skinned enough, Alan was definitely not afraid of them. As for the 7th and 6th level people, Alan didn't take them seriously at all. Ha ha ha, I knew it, you kid would definitely not care about those little things, but I have a good show to watch today. After a few people communicated for a while, soon, the knights notified that Ryan was about to come here, and immediately everyone returned to their respective positions. In the center of the wide hall, a group of dancers danced, while the positions of the nobles were on both sides. Alan and Albert's positions were in the center, and the Duke's and Marquise's positions were at the front. Soon, Duke Ryan walked in with several princes and princesses. P.S. Chapter 5, please give flowers, and subscribe. Chapter 96, carry him away, next one. Subscribe, monthly ticket. The arrival of the Duke meant the beginning of the entire celebration. Alan saw Duke Ryan up close for the first time, the only dragon knight in the entire duchy. Just by getting close, Alan felt a terrifying pressure. Is this the power of a saint-level powerhouse? Just an unintentional move is enough to make a gold-level knight feel pressure. But to be fair, this Duke Ryan is quite handsome, Alan thought to himself. Maybe dragon knights are all handsome guys, just like himself. Alan thought to himself and suddenly caught a glimpse of the little Princess Leia making a face at him. A little girl is quite naughty. Alan remembered that he had promised Leia to send her a silver moon wolf, and he hadn't forgotten it. He also brought a silver moon wolf this time, but he hadn't found a chance to give it to Leia before. Number 60 to 60. Let the celebration begin. After Grand Duke Ryan sat upon the throne, several princes and princesses sat to his lower right, while the dukedoms marquises sat to the Grand Duke's left. The remaining nobles also sat in positions further back. After the nobles were seated, teams of dancers immediately began to dance continuously. The celebration began just like that, with everyone whispering to each other, commenting on which dancer was good or not. Alan, however, lowered his head, eating the roast meat in front of him and drinking the wine. Ahem, Alan, I feel like the atmosphere isn't quite right. Albert suddenly coughed lightly twice, then said to Alan. Alan raised his head and happened to see the young nobles across from him staring intently at him. It's the same all around. Albert reminded him, and Alan turned his head to look, and sure enough, there were many people around him glaring at him fiercely. It seems that there are indeed many people jealous of my excellence. Alan said calmly as he drank another glass of wine. Sure enough, soon after the dancers finished their performance, when a team of knights was supposed to perform court swordsmanship, several young nobles stood up at this time and said to Grand Duke Ryan, Grand Duke, I have a suggestion. The father of this young noble was a senior earl, who became an earl much earlier than Albert, and his family's foundation and status were far superior to the Thistleflower family. Andrew of the War Axe family, I remember you, a young genius, a pillar of the duchy, tell me, what is your suggestion? Grand Duke Ryan sat high on the throne, giving off a feeling of imposing authority. Grand Duke, recently, it has been widely rumored throughout the country that Baron Alan, the second son of Earl Thistleflower, is the invincible Lord of the Silver Wolf, and yesterday I heard that His Royal Highness the First Prince personally went out of the city to welcome this Baron. Andrew was not old, only 26 years old this year, and he had just broken through to the 7th level not long ago, becoming a Golden Knight, and because of this, he missed this national war. Originally, this was not a pity, after all, as the eldest son of Earl War Axe, he was enough to obtain the title of Earl even without military merit. It can be said that Andrew's life was perfect, his cultivation talent was also good, and he might not be able to go further and touch the threshold of the Marquis. Andrew, who should have been radiant, rushed out of seclusion, and what greeted him was the rumor about the invincible Lord of the Silver Wolf. Even if Andrew stated that he was the eldest son of the Earl, a 7th level knight at the age of 26, one of the best geniuses in the duchy, and had a bright future. But what he got was the contemptuous looks of many people, especially the noble ladies, as if they were bewitched, and they were extremely yearning for the Lord of the Silver Wolf. They showed a slight interest in him, this newly promoted Golden Knight. After all, Alan was a 7th level knight at the age of 16. Although the two were both 7th level knights, one was 16 years old and the other was 26 years old, the difference was not small. Moreover, as women, they had no resistance to war heroes at all. This made this Golden Knight, who should have been high-spirited, extremely frustrated and unhappy. Especially since those noble ladies were all eagerly waiting for Alan to enter the royal capital, but they didn't want to pay attention to him at all. As a man, Andrew felt that he could not bear it. In his opinion, the only difference between him and Alan was that he had not participated in the war. In his opinion, if he participated in the war, he would definitely be stronger than that kid. So, under the instigation of many young nobles who had the same experience as him, he prepared to defeat Alan in front of everyone today. He wanted to let everyone know that he, Andrew, was the strongest genius in the Rhine Duchy, and he wanted to let the Grand Duke and all the noble ladies know who was the man they should value. Since this Baron Alan is known as the invincible Lord of the Silver Wolf, his strength must be very strong. It just so happens that I have just broken through to the 7th level knight. I heard that Alan has also broken through to the 7th level not long ago. I would like to have a competition with Baron Alan to test my strength and also add an impromptu program for the Grand Duke and everyone here. What do you think? Instead of watching the court swordsmanship performance, it's better to have a real fight. I think everyone should think so, right? Andrew said, looking around and at Alan at the same time, his eyes full of provocative meaning. Oh, a good suggestion, Baron Alan, what do you think? Grand Duke Rhine did not refuse Andrew's suggestion. Since Viscount Andrew is interested, then I can accompany you. Alan was expressionless, and even ate a piece of roast meat. Okay, then you can compete here. I'll have someone bless this place with magical imprisonment so that your battle won't affect others. Grand Duke Rhine waved his hand, and immediately a group of mages wearing black robes appeared, and they surrounded the middle of the performing area, and began to cast magic. Soon the magic was cast, enough for the two to fight for a short time. Flowers. Then please, Baron Alan. Andrew showed a cruel smile. Before the competition starts, I still want to say a few more words. After all, it is a real battle. I hope Baron Alan will not show mercy, because I will not show mercy either. In addition, since it is a battle, injuries are inevitable. If you are injured, as long as you don't die, I won't blame Baron Alan. I hope Baron Alan will do the same. Hearing this, Alan glanced at Grand Duke Rhine, who did not say anything to stop him, which meant he acquiesced. Okay. Alan's voice spread throughout the hall, and immediately everyone watched with great interest as the two faced each other with swords. Everyone present knew Andrew's intentions, but they did not stop him. After all, Alan was too popular, and the nobles did not like this very much. It would be best if someone suppressed Alan's limelight. Of course, those who thought so were basically the nobles who had not participated in the war. 0. As for the nobles who had participated in the war, they were all staring at the two with strange expressions. Then, let's start. After Andrew finished speaking, his entire person instantly disappeared from the spot, and in the next moment, he had already appeared behind Alan. He was prepared to attack first and solve Alan with one blow. Hey, just a kid, really stupidly waiting for others to attack first. A trace of disdain rose in Andrew's heart, and at the same time, he began to approach Alan. Just when he thought Alan was bound to lose, Alan, who was originally facing away from him, turned around instantly and swung his sword. Terrifying sword energy erupted, and a strong sense of crisis rose in Andrew's heart. No way, such a powerful sword energy. Is this just entering the 7th level? Andrew roared in his heart instantly. The sharpness of this sword energy was definitely the strength of a veteran 7th level. Andrew had just raised his sword to resist, but in the next moment, he showed a look of horror. He saw that his magical weapon with excellent quality was instantly cut off by Alan's sword energy. Andrew's pupils instantly shrank to the size of a small dot, and then he was hit by Alan's sword energy, and the entire person flew out instantly and crashed into the magic imprisonment. Boom! Andrew fell heavily to the ground, and blood began to spurt out quickly. Andrew. Earl War Axe's face changed. His entire person had already rushed to Andrew's side. At this moment Andrew had completely fainted. Alan had control over his strength. This sword would at most seriously injure him, and he would definitely not die. He had a calm expression, ignoring Earl War Axe's grief-stricken appearance. Anyway, it was his son who provoked him first. Alan calmly stood in the center. Carry him away. Next one. I heard that many people want to challenge me. Why don't you take this opportunity to fight me? P.S. First chapter, self-order, morning data are all refreshed. Quickly vote, he. A few. Chapter 97 Conferment, Wolf Sky Earl Allen. Subscription, self-order, monthly ticket. One sword kill. Everyone present was shocked, even Grand Duke Ryan was stunned for a moment. Holy crap. Are you kidding me? Obviously both are 7th level knights. Andrew's combat skills have been tempered and refined, and he was actually killed by one sword. The young nobles who were originally eager to try instantly withered. Looking at Andrew's miserable state, he was cut down to the ground with one sword, and he was so embarrassed in front of so many nobles, even the Grand Duke. I'm afraid that from now on, Andrew can only live in Alan's shadow. Moreover, Andrew will definitely become a laughing stock in the eyes of all nobles, and become the talk of nobles, even commoners. Just thinking about it is terrible. Suddenly, no one dared to show their face. One by one, they lowered their heads, not daring to look Alan in the eye. Alan stood silently for a while, and found that there was no one else, and immediately put away his sword and said, "Here, I gave you the opportunity, but you are also useless. If you don't challenge me, I'm going back to drink." 707. After Alan finished speaking, he returned to his seat and continued to drink. Earl War Axe did not say anything useless. After all, he did not stop his son from challenging others before, and now Andrew is like this. It is indeed his own fault. Although Earl War Axe did not say anything on the surface, Andrew was after all his child, and at this moment he must have added the Thistle Flower family to the blacklist. Alan didn't care about this. A mere earl, there is nothing to care about. Clap clap clap. Alan had just sat back in his seat when he immediately heard a burst of applause. "Baron Alan, your strength has once again opened my eyes. You are indeed the invincible lord of the Silver Wolf, the nightmare of the enemy." His Royal Highness the First Prince Rinison immediately applauded, saying with a smile. Sitting next to him was the little Princess Rochelle, who was also staring at Alan with wide eyes, her small mouth open, looking extremely shocked. "Ha ha ha, as expected of the person I'm optimistic about. Rose, you lost. Send me 100,000 gold coins to the Marquisdom later." Marquis Mad Lion said loudly. Soon the entire hall heard a burst of discussion, and at this moment they were all discussing Alan. After all, Alan's performance just now was too wonderful. One person made all the younger generation dare not say a word. Especially the noble ladies present, their eyes were shining when they looked at Alan. Soon, the center of the hall was cleaned up, and the original court swordsmanship performers immediately came up to perform, and the celebration quickly ended in a pleasant atmosphere. Number 61 to 61. 3 hours later, Duke Lanz announced the start of the enfeoffment ceremony. Of course, the venue wasn't the celebration hall. If the celebration was divided into 2 parts, one for nobles and one for commoners. Then the enfeoffment ceremony was a grand ritual that needed to be announced to the entire country. The venue for the enfeoffment ceremony was the temple of the god of war outside the royal palace, which allowed commoners to observe. Because they already possessed the territory and resources of a maritime duchy, Duke Lanz was offing quite a few people this time, including 4 earls and more than a dozen viscounts. Naturally, Alan was among them. Soon, Duke Lanz and his entourage arrived at the temple, performed a prayer, and then began the enfeoffment ceremony. And to Alan's surprise, he was the first noble to be enfeoffed. Alan. Duke Lanz held a sword in one hand and a handful of soil in the other. "I am here." Alan immediately stepped forward and walked to Duke Lanz's front. Because Duke Lanz was standing on the steps under the statue of the god of war, Alan, standing in front of him, barely reached his abdomen. As Alan walked up to Duke Lanz, the Duke placed the long sword in his hand on Alan's left shoulder. Under the watchful eyes of the god of war, "Baron Alan, I, Duke Lanz, hereby perform the enfeoffment ceremony for you. From today onwards, you shall be the serious Earl of the Duchy of Lanz. Your territory shall be next to the Thornflower Territory, west to Ironwood City in the Thornflower Territory, east to the Strandfoss Mountains, north to Kulch City in the Steel Fist Territory, and south to Nikia Harbor. These 4 directions shall be the boundaries, and the center shall be Sirius Territory." Duke Lanz scattered the soil from his other hand onto Alan. The long sword on Alan's shoulder represented the power and authority Duke Lanz bestowed upon Alan as an earl, while the soil represented the rich fiefdom Duke Lanz granted Alan. Sirius Earl Alan grasped the long sword tightly. It is the symbol of your status, it symbolizes the power and authority of an earl. Inside the magnificent and glorious hall, Duke Lanz solemnly placed the long sword in his hand in front of Alan. Alan reached out and took it, bowing slightly at the same time. Yes, Duke, I will be honored by this and serve the country. Alan's expression was also very serious. Duke Lanz nodded slightly. All right, serious Earl, go to the side and wait. Upon hearing this, Alan slowly stood to the side. The whole process was extremely solemn and dignified, and even the commoners watching from afar didn't make the slightest sound. This was the rule. The enfeoffment ceremony was extremely solemn and dignified, and it wasn't yet their time to speak. However, at this moment, many young men and women, upon seeing Alan being enfeoffed as an earl, burst out with a bright light in their eyes, their expressions slightly excited. Soon, besides Alan, the other earls and viscounts were also enfeoffed. At this time, Duke Lanz raised his arms and shouted, "People, nobles, applaud and cheer for them." The nobles standing around immediately began to applaud, but the biggest commotion came from the commoners outside. After knowing that they could cheer, the young men and women began to cheer. Invincible Lord of the Silver Wolf, Serious Earl. Serious Earl. Serious Earl Alan, I love you. Well, the enthusiasm of the commoners outside was like fire. Of course, from time to time, some strange calls were mixed in with the cheers of this group of commoners. For example, the one who said, "I love you." Alan and the others held the long swords given to them by Duke Lanz and slowly walked out of the temple. He raised the long sword high, and everyone immediately boiled over again. Compared to Alan's popularity, the other newly enfeoffed nobles were almost reduced to supporting roles. Subscribe to Chinese Novel Audio Wave. In front of the temple of the god of war, tens of thousands of people cheered. Alan's expression was slightly dazed, and at the same time, his heart was filled with excitement. From today onwards, he was no longer a country baron, but the serious Earl of the Duchy of Lanz. Serious Earl. Serious Earl. Serious Earl. Amidst countless cheers, the enfeoffment ceremony ended. Duke Lanz announced that the royal capital would be in a frenzy tonight. The entire royal capital began to boil. Tonight was destined to be an unforgettable and boiling night. And as a war hero, Alan was the most discussed person by everyone tonight. 1.7 In the royal palace, the nobles were reveling in a banquet hall of the palace. And Alan was the focus of everyone. Regardless of men, women, old or young, they were approaching Alan, wanting to get in touch with him. Especially the young and beautiful noble ladies, they couldn't wait to crawl into Alan's arms at this moment. Of course, this was rejected by Alan. In addition, with the arrival of Mad Lion, Marquis Crimson Flame, His Royal Highness the First Prince, and the little princess, others could only keep a sufficient distance from Alan. After all, they also knew that their status was not qualified enough to enter the social circle of princes and marquises. At the same time, they valued Alan even more. After all, this newly rich man was a big shot valued by the Marquis and His Royal Highness the Prince. P.S. Second chapter, all data, flowers, everyone, please vote more. Chapter 98 Generous Rewards, Heaven-Defying Magical Talent. Auto subscriptions. Looks like you are very popular. The first Prince Linnison walked to Alan's side with a glass of wine in his hand. I don't want to be so popular. Alan shrugged his shoulders and said helplessly. He originally didn't want to attend any noble banquets at all. If it wasn't because he was in a good mood today after becoming an earl and giving Duke Lanz face, Alan might have wanted to go back and see his new territory overnight. Thinking of his serious territory, Alan's heart was filled with heat. Of course, he also had to look at the quests. After being enfeoffed in the afternoon, Alan's main quest had already been completed. Originally, the system only asked him to be promoted to Viscount, but now he directly became an earl in one step. The system gave him a very high evaluation of his quest completion, and the rewards he received were naturally extremely generous, but at that time he was very excited in his mind and didn't pay much attention. Alan thought of this, and wanted to leave this banquet even more. He was obviously busy with everything, but you let 25 of me waste my life here hooking up with noble ladies. Hey, Alan, don't be so restrained. You are a hero, the protagonist of tonight. Look, there are many noble ladies focusing their eyes on you. I bet, as soon as we leave, we will definitely be surrounded by beautiful ladies. Maybe tomorrow morning, you will wake up in a pile of women in an unknown place. Linnison said with a smile. That's simply a nightmare. Alan was expressionless. Indeed, those beautiful noble ladies were extremely enthusiastic about him, but after seeing the Saint Fairy Lucy, Alan felt that his resistance to women had been raised to an unparalleled level. These noble ladies didn't make Alan feel amazing, let alone be tempted. Alan, don't you have some special preferences? Seeing that Alan was indifferent to women, Linnison frowned slightly. No, Your Highness, you are thinking too much, it's just that I'm not interested in them for the time being. Alan immediately interrupted Linnison's words. Okay, it seems that Alan, you have high demands for women. I wonder what kind of woman can enter your eyes. Linnison said with a smile. God knows. Alan chatted with him casually, and soon he found an opportunity to slip out of the royal palace and return to the villa with the cooperation of Linnison and Marquis Mad Lion. That group of women is too terrifying, especially since there are still many married noble ladies who are actually flirting with me. I can't imagine it. Alan shuddered, and then his thoughts quickly focused on his system. The hustle and bustle and excitement of the day made him not pay attention to the system, and now he was ready to see what rewards he had obtained. Congratulations to the host for over-completing the task, gaining 100,000 experience points. Obtaining advanced magical talent. Obtaining a medium-sized magic crystal mine. Obtaining a medium-sized gold mine. Because Alan over-completed the task, the rewards were much more generous. Especially the 100,000 experience points and advanced magical talent, which were simply what he needed most now. The experience points were enough for him to level up to level 8, and now Alan's goal was to level up to the sanctuary level as soon as possible and become a true dragon knight. By then, he would no longer be afraid of others knowing about his possession of a dragon. In addition, magical talent was also something Alan was very much looking forward to. Magic and battle aura were the two main cultivation systems in this world. Compared to the knight's battle aura, the magician's magic power was even more mysterious and unpredictable, and dazzling. Those colorful magics could always bring unexpected surprises. How powerful is advanced magical talent? Alan stroked his chin. He had previously received guidance from magicians brought in by Albert. So he still knew more about magicians. First is meditation, which is related to mental power. Meditation senses the surrounding elements. Everyone's elemental affinity is different, so the elements that everyone can sense are also different. The type of element represents the type of magic that you can cultivate. The higher the elemental affinity, the more dense and rich the elements you perceive, and the easier it is to cultivate. Let me try meditating and see. Well, fortunately, I know basic meditation. Alan showed a smile. He had suffered a lot when he was learning it. After all, when his dream of being a knight was shattered, Alan placed all his hopes on magic. Soon, Alan skillfully began to meditate. The originally difficult process of meditation actually became extremely easy at this moment. Alan quickly entered the state. Although he didn't open his eyes, he still saw the colorful small particles that were slowly emerging around him. Alan was overjoyed. Elements. Magic elements. Number 62 to 62. He truly sensed the existence of elements for the first time. According to his former magician teacher, only those who could sense elements could practice magic. Alan hadn't sensed them before, but now he could clearly see colorful light spots floating around him. White light element, red fire element, blue water element. Alan sensed them one by one and discovered that he seemed to have an affinity for all known types of elements. Does this mean he is an all-element magic genius? Moreover, Alan could clearly feel a great deal of each magical element. It was as if the surrounding world had become an ocean of elements, with endless elements. Does this mean his talent is good? Alan recalled the words of his former magic teacher, 707. People with ordinary talent could only sense dozens of magical element particles. Those with medium talent could sense hundreds or thousands of element particles, which gathered together and seemed to be the size of a bowl of water. Those with high talent could sense a great many element particles, which gathered densely like a small pond. Top-tier talents could sense even more element particles, like a huge lake. However, Ellen had never heard that magician mention a situation like his, like sensing an ocean of elements. Advanced magic talent is already the limit of magic talent in the current system. Ellen pondered, reaching the system's current limit. It seemed that this advanced talent was definitely more awesome than the top-tier talent mentioned on the continent. Well, it seems I can moonlight as a magician in the future, but magic knowledge seems to be relatively expensive, and it's not easy to buy magic knowledge. Ellen thought to himself, but soon a smile appeared on his face. Now that I have the most important magic talent, the others can be bought with money, and even if it's not easy, I can still buy them. Problems that can be solved with money are not problems. Ellen quickly continued to meditate. Chapter 99 Magic Books, Return to Rose Town. Self-subscriptions. After a night of meditation, Ellen still felt energetic and not sleepy. This was probably the difference between a magician and a knight. Knights need to maintain sleep and conserve energy, while magicians, meditation can greatly relieve fatigue. Of course, magicians also need sleep, but they need very little time, and more time is spent on studying magic. At dawn, the noisy sounds outside gradually stopped, and last night's carnival finally gradually ceased. After all, most people are ordinary people, and they have to live a normal life the next day, so in the early morning, everyone went home to rest. Albert also came back in the early morning. It seemed that the Earl had a great time playing at night. By noon, Albert had almost rested. The physique of an 8th-level knight allowed him to quickly recover from 2 consecutive nights of revelry. After completing the enfeoffment ceremony, Ellen simply strolled around the royal capital. Most of the nobles had already left, and it was estimated that within 2 days, the royal capital would return to its previous appearance. In the afternoon, Ellen prepared to leave the royal capital with Albert. Although the scenery here was indeed good, Ellen still preferred to return to his own territory. "Are you leaving so soon?" Rhionason and Laisha sent Ellen outside the royal capital. At this moment, Princess Laisha had already mounted the silver moon wolf that Ellen had given her, and the little girl seemed very happy. Ellen also obtained some magic knowledge from her. After all, he would not forget that this little princess was a noble magician. Ellen felt that it was not a loss to exchange a silver moon wolf that had been promised for a batch of magic knowledge. After all, as a princess, the magic books in her hands were naturally the most precious type. "Yes, Your Highness, after all, this is the royal capital. Our identities are not suitable for staying in the royal capital for a long time, and there are many things to deal with in the territory," Ellen said with a slight smile. He had a good impression of this eldest prince. At least this prince valued him extremely, and he could clearly feel this. "Well, that's right. You have just been promoted to Earl, and the territory needs you. Work hard, Earl Skywolf." Rhionason patted Ellen on the shoulder. Ellen, remember to return the book to me after you finish reading it. I secretly borrowed it to you." Laisha glanced around and said cautiously. Ellen smiled and said, "Don't worry, Your Highness, I will return it to you soon. Of course, if you need it, you can come to Skywolf territory to find me at any time, and I will treat you well," Ellen said with a smile. This little princess was simply a treasure trove. Grand Duke Ryan doted on this princess extremely. Her study was full of precious knowledge books, magic knowledge, fighting spirit knowledge, magic medicine knowledge, etc. Each book was very difficult to buy. Ellen felt that only this princess in the duchy had so many. Probably no one else had them. Then work hard. I really don't understand. You are obviously a knight, but you have to read magic knowledge, Laisha said with a light hum. Ellen smiled without saying a word and did not explain. All right, I should leave. Ellen and Albert bid farewell to Rhionason and Laisha, and the two quickly left with the Wolf Cavalry and Thornflower Knights. 7 days later, Ellen returned to Rose Town. Lord Earl Skywolf Ellen. The townspeople of Rose Town had already heard about Ellen being granted the title of Earl Skywolf. Ellen had just returned with the Wolf Cavalry when he saw the townspeople worshipping and cheering for him on the commercial road outside the town. My lord, you have finally returned. Marco and Sparrow, as the two most important officials, one civil and one military, had been waiting here for a long time. Ellen nodded to them. It's been half a month since I left Rose Town. It seems you have taken good care of the town. Alan did not go to Wolf territory immediately, but returned to his Rose Town. Although he had become an earl, Rose Town was still his fief. In addition, Wolf territory is a newly divided earldom, half of which was originally an undeveloped area on the border of the Ryan Principality. It has a small population and is relatively backward. But the advantage is that it is rich in resources and the land is fertile. Because it is close to the Strandfoss Mountains, there are often magical beasts raging here, but the advantage is also that the land here is extremely fertile because no one cultivates it. Originally, this area was a no-man's land. It was only after decades of construction by the Ryan Principality that people gradually settled here, which can be considered a foundation. After all, those truly prosperous and rich places have long been occupied by nobles. In addition, those so-called prosperous areas were actually like Wolf territory at the beginning. They were developed through the efforts of lords for decades and several generations. As the first lord of Wolf territory, Alan naturally has great responsibilities. Alan did not complain about this, but instead liked it very much. Building his favorite territory from scratch is Alan's pursuit. Similarly, because Wolf territory does not yet have a lord's city and castle for the time being, Alan still needs to live in Rose Town for a while. He will be able to move there when Wolf City in Wolf territory is almost built. Of course, this is not difficult for Alan. It's just that we have tried our best to look after and take care of the territory for you, my lord, but after all, we are not you, and we don't have much talent. I hope you won't blame us for many shortcomings. Sparrow bowed to Alan and said, "It's already good enough. It's meritorious to take good care of the town. Let's go back to the castle first," Alan said, leading the people back to his nice two-story small castle. "Sparrow, Marco, as the people who followed me from the beginning, you should be rewarded after I was promoted to earl, but for the time being, my Wolf territory has just started, and there is not even a lord's city, so your rewards will have to wait for a while," Alan said to them with a slight smile. No hurry, my lord, we are already very satisfied with your words," Sparrow said with a beaming smile. Marco also became excited. "Very good, Grandpa Edward, have someone prepare some food for me, large pieces of roasted meat, and fine wine." Alan sat on the sofa and said to Edward, the butler who was standing upright beside him, "Yes, my lord, I will also have the maids prepare some hot water so that you can take a comfortable bath later." Butler Edward said with a slight bow. "That's great. Also, I need a map of the Ryan Principality and the surrounding area." Alan nodded and said, he had been traveling for the past 7 days, so he had no time to take a bath. "Yes, my lord, one moment please." Edward immediately turned and left to get the map. "Now let's talk about the situation in my Wolf territory." Alan turned his head and said to Sparrow and Marco. P.S. Chapter 4, Self-Order. N. Chapter 100. A brand new territory, a brand new starting point. Self-orders. Soon, a slightly yellowed map was brought to the restaurant by Butler Edward. Because Alan was waiting for dinner, he also brought Marco and Sparrow to the restaurant. The dining table was quite large, just enough to hold the map. "Look, from Steel Fist territory in the north to Nakia Harbor in the south, from Thistle Flower territory in the west to the Strandfoss Mountains in the east, this is my Wolf territory." Alan drew a circle in the southeast corner of the Ryan Principality, representing his territory. "Oh, my lord, your fief looks extremely vast, even larger than Thistle Flower territory," Sparrow exclaimed. "That's because of the Strandfoss Mountains." Marco frowned slightly. "I heard that there are magical beasts raging there. Earl Thistle Flower is extremely headache about this. If it weren't for those troublesome magical beasts, this large piece of land would be worth 1.5 Thistle Flower territories." "What? Magical beasts raging? Damn it, how could it be this kind of broken place?" Sparrow's face turned green. This shrewd financial officer knew very well how difficult it would be to develop a territory where magical beasts were raging. The first thing to be solved is the problem of magical beasts. If this problem cannot be solved, it will be a nightmare for the Lord and his people. "Sparrow, I'm already pretty good 707. Except for me, most of the newly appointed nobles' fiefs are on the Blue Moon Principality." Alan shrugged and said, "The fiefs at sea are scarce in resources and the land is not fertile." You have to know that it is already good that I can get a fief on land. Sparrow was silent for a while, then sighed and said, that looks pretty good indeed. Don't worry, gentlemen, magical beasts are not a problem. What we need to do now is to develop the territory. Alan smiled slightly. He didn't care about the magical beasts in the Strandfoss Mountains at all. What he cared about was the development of the territory. Oh, does my lord have a way? Sparrow's eyes lit up immediately when he heard this. Number 63 to 63. There is a way. Alan nodded affirmatively. As expected of someone watched over by the god of war, no problem can stump you, my lord. Sparrow said with great joy, his eyes immediately fixed on the map of the Skywolf territory. My lord, the population here is sparse, the land is fertile, and the southern territory is flat and vast, with 3 rivers running through it, allowing for large-scale agricultural development. The terrain in the northern territory undulates slightly. Sparrow began to share his insights. Alan nodded slightly. Sparrow was indeed a financial officer. His ideas for the development and planning of the territory were excellent, and many of his thoughts aligned with Alan's. My lord, if the problem of magical beasts can be solved, then the Skywolf territory is undoubtedly an excellent territory. Marco also spoke. The south is near the sea, and the Blue Moon Principality of the Ryan Kingdom has already been defeated and become land of the Ryan Kingdom. We don't have to worry about strong enemies from the sea anymore. Although there is the powerful Shak Principality to the east, it is blocked by the Strandfoss Mountains. Magical beasts are also a headache for them, which just allows us to not have to worry about prying eyes from strong enemies on land again. And the remaining 2 sides are internal to the Ryan Kingdom, one of which is connected to the Thorn's Flower territory, which is extremely beneficial to us. The Thorn's Flower Earl can provide us with a certain amount of population. The 3 of them spoke one after another. Soon, Alan's dinner was prepared and brought up. Alan then waved his hand slightly. All right, the planning for the Skywolf territory will stop here for today. Marco, recently I need you to lead the Wolf Riders and other cavalry to escort a group of townspeople to the Skywolf territory to build the main city. After all, as the Lord, I at least need a city and a castle. I understand, my lord. I will take the men and horses to the Skywolf territory tomorrow, but my lord, we don't have enough manpower. Marco said with difficulty. Don't worry, I have discussed this with Earl Albert, and he will give us help. Also, Sparrow, go to the Roland Chamber of Commerce in the Thorn's Flower territory and tell them that I need population, a large population, and they will have a way. Alan said to Sparrow again. Yes, my lord, I will go tomorrow. Sparrow nodded slightly. Alan nodded. All right, you can go down and rest first. Starting tomorrow, we will be busy. Yes. The 2 left with excited emotions. Alan began to eat. After finishing dinner and taking a comfortable bath, Alan saw Lucy return from outside. Alan, you're back. When Lucy saw Alan, her eyes lit up. The holy fairy maiden immediately pounced on him, not caring about the difference between men and women at all. Alan only felt a fresh and elegant fragrance rushing towards him, and then he felt his body sink, with a holy fairy maiden hanging on him. Alan, Alan, Alan. Lucy rubbed her face against Alan's face happily, looking like she missed Alan very much. Lucy, how has it been these past few days? Alan hugged Lucy and stroked her little head. Very good, they all like to play with me. Lucy pointed to the spirits of nature surrounding her. Alan nodded. It's good as long as you're happy, Lucy. We're going to move in a while. Would you like to go with me to see my new territory tomorrow? Lucy nodded upon hearing this. As long as it's with Alan, I can go anywhere. Alan smiled. The holy fairy maiden Lucy was indeed considerate. The 2 chatted for a while and then rested separately. Alan first cultivated with Safi for a period of time, and then continued to cultivate magic. Early the next morning, Alan set off for the Skywolf territory with Lucy and Marco. When they learned that Alan needed manpower to build the Skywolf territory, the townspeople responded enthusiastically, even neglecting the crops in the fields. Alan was also a little bit troubled by this. He appeased the crowd, letting some people stay to take care of the crops, and taking the rest with him. Marco left the group midway to seek a large number of people from Albert in the Thorn's Flower territory. Alan led the townspeople to the Skywolf territory all the way. The Skywolf territory was not far from Rose Town. If Rose Town was not separated by 3 mountains, Rose Town would almost be next to the Skywolf territory. But because of the mountains, they had to take a detour from the commercial road before turning to the Skywolf territory. On the way, they passed through Ironwood city of Viscount Ironwood. Viscount Ironwood was extremely respectful and excited when he saw Alan. "My lord, are you immigrating to build the territory?" In Ironwood city, Alan and Viscount Ironwood sat together drinking. The friendship forged on the battlefield made them get along very happily. "Yes, the Skywolf territory is in its initial stage, and I have to hurry up and build a main city," Alan said with a smile. "Oh, my lord, you must be short of manpower, right? I can give you 3,000 people to help," Viscount Ironwood said immediately. Alan smiled. "That would be great." He only brought out 2,000 people from the territory, plus Viscount Ironwood's manpower, there would be 5,000 people. Thank you for watching. Continue exploring the fascinating world of Chinese novels with us. Hit that subscribe button on Chinese Novel Audio Wave to stay updated with our latest stories. And never miss out on a great listen.